I believe in always being prepared for the unexpected. That could mean a natural disaster or even a threat to your loved ones. But what if the unexpected danger wasn't something outside your door, but inside your own body? Achy joints, digestive issues, weight gain, and fatigue. We're told these are normal signs of aging, but in my experience, it could mean something much worse. I call them the three internal enemies.
We're going to pause it there at the three internal enemies to make it rhyme with the three eternal truths. And we're going to thank our first sponsor of the night, by the way. We're starting off with it, which is Chuck Norris, by the way. I was going to start off with some Joe Biden stuff, but I want to have a smooth segue for when we start playing the highlights of that debacle of a debate. Chuck Norris. Have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I recently saw the video. I'm not playing the entire video. You're going to have to see it yourselves. Dude's 81 years old and still looks amazing. What's even more shocking is that he's stronger, can work out longer, and has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. How did he do this? By making one change. He says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife started doing it. She feels better, healthier than ever, 10 years younger, and her body looks leaner, and she has energy all the day. Why do I feel a little dirty talking about Chuck Norris's wife's lean body? Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Viva. The link's in the description, and I'll cut and paste it one more time. Chuck Defense with an SE.com/Viva, or click the link in the description. It will change the way you think about your health. Once again, chuckdefense.com/Viva, and click the link in the description to watch the entire video now. You won't believe how simple it is. Just a reminder, legendary Chuck Norris is a whopping 81 years young and has more energy than he has ever had before. He discovered he could create dramatic changes to his health simply by focusing on three things that sabotage our body as we age. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the description. chuckdefense.com/Viva. Now let me get back here. I'm going to give everybody the link. chuckdefense.com/Viva. I'm going to take it out. Take it out, eh? Here's the link. Thank you, Chuck. By the way, link to Chuck. Oh boy, the kids are not understanding that I'm live right now. Lala, out and close the door, please. Thank you. So the link is in the description, people. As you can tell, I'm in a cottage with people who don't respect personal space. I'm in the corner of a room. Like I can't get into any more of a corner than I am right now. People have put baby in a corner. Now, before we get too far into the stream, let me just make sure that we are live everywhere. Let me see here. Hello, everybody. Don't make me read that. Let me make sure that we're live across all platforms. We should be live on Viva Fry on Rumble. Let me just refresh here. It looks like we're all good over there. All right, hold on. We're good there. vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Are we good there? We're good there. Oh boy, am I coming in hot? Tell me if I'm too loud, actually. We'll see when Barnes gets in here because I had to tinker with my not claustrophobic. It's a big room. I'm just in the corner. And what's driving me crazy is the floodlight is right there. So if I look at you like this, I am a robot. In fact, I kind of feel like I have a chip in my brain. Viva Vrive from the outhouse. It is now day 5 in Kami, Canada, and I have yet to be arrested. Okay, people, have we got a show tonight? We've got the one big question that everybody's asking, and that I'm wondering, because I have money riding on it now. Oh my goodness. It's not often I get to say I called it, but like on an unlikely call that now everyone is saying was totally obvious and everyone saw it coming a mile away. The same people who started off the week saying Biden is going to mop the floor with Trump are now saying one bad debate night doesn't mean that you're a demented, senile old fool. Oh, it doesn't, but it certainly increases the odds of it being the case. But we all knew that Joe Biden has, you do the side-by-side comparisons from 2019 when he was already in a state of decline to 2024. It's not funny. It's sad and a testament to how stupid the powers that be think the electorate is, that they've been jamming through this narrative. Biden is fine. Biden is sharper than ever. The best, I might actually have to play it, was Joe Scarborough talking about how Joe Biden is cogent and he's better than he's ever been. And if it weren't true, he wouldn't be saying it. He's not lying. Everybody, so we got a bunch of SCOTUS decisions, which we're going to talk about when Barnes gets here. And we had the debate of all debates, which I'm going to show some highlights before Barnes gets here so that we don't have to play video highlights when Barnes is here. And we're going to talk about it, the consequences, the impact, and the legality, the logistics of how would it work if, and I'm going to say when, Biden is kicked from the ticket, assuming it's not for natural causes. And I'm not saying that to be funny or cynical, but like, natural causes, I presume, it's a no-brainer. How can they politely allow him to leave the ticket or nudge him out of the ticket? But before we even get started with any of that, if anybody doesn't know who I am, what the heck are you doing here and how did you find your way? Viva Fry, former Montreal litigator, current Florida rumbler, although I am back behind the Iron Rainbow. I mean, quite literally the Iron Rainbow, where you've got marches of people in the street walking around naked, dangling their junk in front of the faces of children. And by junk, I mean genitalia. We're living through, I would say Sodom and Gomorrah, but I don't actually know that story from the Bible except for the name. We're living through insanity and times of not just institutionalized mental illness, but normalized and glamorized mental illness. You watch the video of the Pride Month, Pride Season, Pride Year, Pride Decade, and you're seeing what are nothing other than mentally ill adults who have seen their political permission slip to walk around flapping their ding-dongs in the faces of children. And in the name of liberation, in the name of, you can't get angry at that because that would make you a homophobic bigot, my ass. I mean, do they have an ism or an obia for pedophiles? Like, are you a pedophilobia if you are vehemently opposed to pedophilia? Adults running around naked, flashing their junk in front of children is nothing but pedophilic voyeurism. Pedophilic exhibitionism. Sorry, voyeurism is when you're looking. Exhibitionism is when people are like, hey, look at me. So I've come back behind the Iron Rainbow. I've got an event with Rebel News out in Toronto sooner than later. Then we've got the RNC convention, which, my goodness, I'm checking my predicted compulsively. But it's crazy. You all know how I feel about having stepped back behind the Iron Rainbow. It's like entering a mental institution or an insane asylum where the patients have taken over the asylum. It used to be home and it used to feel like home, and now it doesn't feel like home. And I got to tell you, it doesn't look like home either. So that's why I'm on the road and I'm in corners of rooms of cottages. Subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you turn your notifications on. But let me just bring up some of these things here because we get these things called super chats, Rumble rants. And if you want to support us, the best way to do it is vivabarneslaw.locals.com. I'll read a few of these and then we're going to get into the show tonight. Dustalov Act Mankari, mandatory carry, good to see you again. Had the founders foreseen the future, they would have written a very different Second Amendment, quote, a well-protected public being necessary to the security of a free state, the duty of the people to keep and bear arms shall be enforced. So we got some decisions from SCOTUS tonight that we're going to talk about. Cheryl Gagey says, Viva with the hair of Samson and the shoulders of a Greek god, Dionysus. You should have just picked up that tree. Oh, look at that. And move it out of the road. For those of you who are not following us on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, we drove the Bronco 2,200 kilometers. I don't know, whatever it is from Florida to Quebec. And as I got here, someone was looking at the car and they're saying, "Oh, you got the winch on the front. That's just for show." I was like, I haven't used it yet. And that was the day before yesterday. Yesterday, I went off-roading with my kid. It was sort of like a dirt road. And lo and behold, there was a tree that had just fallen fresh across the path. And we were on an adventure. So we hooked up the winch to the tree and we hauled it off the road. And then we drove up to a quarry where we proceeded to climb to the top of the quarry and push big rocks off the quarry. It was actually quite fun. So yeah, I could have probably pulled it with my hands, but the kids would leave you alone if they knew this is how dad makes the money to buy them everything they want. Oh, kids they don't get no respect. Don't get no respect. All right, let's see what's going on Rumble, and then we're going to start playing some highlights here. Look at this. We got Rumble. It says, being reported, the Biden family has met and are encouraging him to continue this race. Oh my God. It's not LOL. What's crying softly internally? CSI. We're going to call it CSI, crying softly internally. Eurythmic, thank you very much. And then we've got T1990. How do we get liberal boomers like my father to realize that most of our establishment figures are corrupt and that Trump isn't a psycho who is going to be a dictator? It's it's the Mark Twain thing. You know, people cannot admit that they were duped on Trump. The people might have been duped on Trump, and that some people thought he was going to be a savior who was going to drain the swamp and for you, do all sorts of miraculous things. Nobody was duped on that, but he did not accomplish everything that he set out to accomplish. That I think we can all agree. How do you get people to realize that they were duped into thinking that he is Hitler incarnate? You can't, because they are too emotionally invested in that belief. On the one hand, they might have done and said things along with that idea that they cannot admit they were wrong about because it would make them feel stupid, mean, angry, etc. Flip side, also, you can't get them to acknowledge it because it would mean that they were stupid enough to have fallen for it in the first place. That's the thing about the ego. To admit that you were wrong means that you have to acknowledge that you were gullible enough to have been duped in the first place. And it's not easy for people to say that to themselves. But they better start real soon. The amazing thing is here, there's some people who can't admit that they were wrong. And then there's others who they're not dishonest because they're being paid to spew the nonsense. I made a joke about Daniel Goldman and, or at least my reply to this tweet. I said, like, Daniel Goldman's livelihood depends on, being invested in this lie, and he's getting paid to be a shill, yada, yada. I think I forgot that Daniel Goldman is incredibly wealthy. Let me see here. Daniel Goldman, United States representative. Okay, let's go with net worth. I forgot why he has. Yeah, Goldman is among the wealthiest members of Congress with an estimated personal net worth of up to $253 million, according to financial disclosure forms. So Daniel Goldman, a man who has no problem continuing to peddle the lie because he's worth $250 million. I mean, I don't know how you lose that, but I imagine you can lose half of it on, if it's paper money and it's in the market and the stuff crashes, he'll lose half of his net worth. I can imagine if he's got it in gold and you have to flee the country and you sell at a loss and liquidation prices, you're worth $253 million. But unless you're sitting on cash, and even if you're sitting on cash, because that cash is going to be worth much less than $253 million with the rates of inflation and the cost of goods going up. Bottom line, the dude is filthy rich beyond anybody's wildest comprehension. So he won't have to suffer any of the consequences of continuing to peddle the lie that Joe Biden is a viable candidate who will make America better. Listen to this. This is Daniel Goldman. We all have bad nights, but no one is defined by their worst or best night. Joe Biden's record of leadership and progress contrasts with Trump's disastrous presidency, extremism, and nonstop lying. Isn't it funny? The guy's accusing Trump of nonstop lying. Everything he's set up to now has been a lie. Americans know these two men, and they know President Biden is the right choice. He wrote this after the debate. Let's hear what good old lying Goldman has to say.
Look, I think everyone needs to calm down a little bit. It was a bad night. There was a poor performance, but one night does not make a campaign, and it does not erase 3.5 years of stellar leadership that has brought our country back to the forefront on a global stage, has protected democracy around the world.
I mean, it's brought it back to the forefront on a global stage, by bringing the world to the brink of World War III. Yeah. By laundering hundreds of billions of dollars through Ukraine for the purposes of fighting a proxy war, while laundering taxpayer dollars. And after all of the blood has been shed and the Ukrainian men and women sent to the slaughter, 2 years later, you now have people talking about that negotiated settlement that they were told to walk away from at the beginning of the conflict because Joe Biden has to get the 10% for the big guy in all of this conflict here.
Here at home, and has benefited the vast majority of Americans, lower class, middle class Americans, through some historic legislation. And when you compare what you saw from Joe Biden last night to what you saw from Donald Trump, you realize that this is a choice ultimately in November of someone who is
they got to show an unflattering picture of Trump. Look at Anderson Cooper's disgusting faux intelligence face. I mean, he's real intelligence, like government intelligence. Look at Andrew Goldman. Daniel Goldman. You're making a lot of sense. Oh yeah, let's hear what you have to say about him.
Honest, a man of integrity who has served his country his entire life, against a felon who is an inveterate liar and only cares about himself.
Look at Goldman's
And
eyes.
so, yes, the New York Times is correct. The stakes are very high. But let's not go with this double standard where we just normalize Donald Trump's absurd behavior.
Do you notice they all spout the same nonsense? Not one of them has any concrete example of what he lied about. Not one. It's just inveterate lies. They throw in like some fancy language, lies, absurd behavior. Not one example.
And absolute outrageous lies of denying January 6th, his refusal to accept the results of the election.
Lie and another lie.
His pride at overturning Roe v. Wade and taking reproductive freedom away. That is what the choice is. That's who.
That's also a lie, but we all know that.
We're dealing with here.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it's convenient for the New York Times to say, oh, Joe Biden should step down. Why aren't they saying that Donald Trump should step down? They're just.
Because one is about mental degeneracy and the other is about political disagreement, you raging moron.
Always
Look at his face.
apologizing and normalizing.
Yeah, have you noticed they all of these lying intelligence asset politicians, they all have the same face? What's the guy, Kirby? The other one, Blinken. They all have this very plastic face when they talk, and they talk in a very smooth, comforting voice. It's brainwashing. Look at that face.
For Donald Trump. And frankly, Anderson, that's what happened last night on the debate stage. Nobody fact-checked Donald Trump when he was blatantly lying over and over.
And this guy's been talking for 1 minute and 46 seconds and didn't mention one fact that Trump lied about. They don't understand the difference between hyperbole, opinion, and statements of fact that are incorrect. You want a statement that they should have fact-checked? I mean, the problem is they have to be able to understand it in order to fact-check it. Let's fact check this. Can your sister sexually assault you and get you pregnant? Can we fact check that one? Look at that face, first of all. This is a man on the left who is genuinely dismayed at the state of the country. And this is a man on the right who has no idea what country he's in.
President Biden?
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided. Supported Roe. And that's this idea that they were all against it is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor, have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states, let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in, they talk about that. But here's the deal: there's a lot of young women who are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Yeah, thank you. Please stop talking, sir. How do you fact check something like that? A minute, 65 seconds of pure demented verbal diarrhea. Go fact check that. And what did one have to do with the other? They were talking about Roe v. Wade, and then he starts talking about an American who was murdered by an illegal immigrant and who went to the funeral, but then bringing it back to people getting raped and impregnated by their brothers and their sisters. Go fact check that, Goldman. That doesn't count as a lie because it's just the result of absolute dementia. It's the most outrageous thing. If France is any indication, the global swamp is under threat. There's only one meaningful analysis for the establishment: panic. There's no question about that. Crash. Oh, that was from Nescio, and then crash prone, 5 pounds euros. Picture the scene of Winston blindly humping the Washington Monument and discuss how that symbolizes the decline of America. All right, I see Barnes is in the backdrop. But before we get into that, and speaking of the decline of the American empire, although it's not the globalist empire, there will be something else up their sleeves, people, and they will bring it, and they will bring it hard, and they will bring it relentlessly because they will not be happy until they control every single aspect of your life. And that's where we come into the fine folks at the Wellness Company. Listen up, people. If you're not stockpiling medications after what we've been through, you're setting yourself up for disaster. The warning signs are everything with this bird flu. In the headlines, the FDA commissioner just went on recording saying that the real worry is that it will jump from animals to humans, from lung to lung. I'm not quoting now, this is sort of paraphrasing. And the mortality rate has been upwards of 25%. Yep. We've got to have testing, got to have antivirals, and we need to have a vaccine ready to go. I forget what country. I just read that they already have a vaccine for a bird flu that hasn't yet become a pandemic. Could they be more transparent about what's going to happen? Dr. Eric Ding, COVID-19 expert, says, I would start stockpiling flu medicine, Tamiflu for your family starting now. If bird flu is ever human-to-human transmissible, you will regret it when the near shortage of medications hits. It's our personal responsibility to be prepared. And fortunately, you can get medications like Tamiflu easily without having to book an office appointment with your physician. The wellness company developed the Contagion Emergency Kit, a prescription-only stockpile of life-saving medications, including Tamiflu, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and Z-Pak. Medications that every American should have in the medicine cabinet. Do you have what your family needs the next time around? Because there will be a next time. And doctors might not consider prescribing things like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. We've got you covered. Easily order online the one-of-a-kind prescription contagion emergency kit from the Wellness Company. Each prep kit provides you with carefully selected assortment of effective medications for bird flu, COVID-19, other respiratory illnesses. The medications include ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, Tamiflu, budesonide, screw that one up, along with a nebulizer. Rest easy knowing that you have the meds on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use. Backed by the research of experts like Dr. Peter McCullough, every American should have at least one of these kits in their home. Avoid the chaos, the wait times of a hospital, and have exactly what you need for as low a cost as one doctor's visit. At the end of the day, have these life-saving medications on hand, and you won't have to worry about whatever is next. It's only available in the States. Kits are only available in the USA, so don't try ordering them in Canada. Go to twc.health/Viva, thewellnesscompany.health/Viva. We'll get you 10% off at checkout plus free shipping. And this is unfortunately only available for those in the States. Link is in the description as well. All right, well, now we're going to get into Biden. We're going to see if Barnes can resolve a debate that I'm having with some family members. And we're going to talk about the other SCOTUS rulings and a ton of other stuff. Oh, it's going to be one hell of a week. Okay, Barnes, I'm bringing you in by doing this. Sir, how goes the battle?
Good. Let me make.
Yeah, touch that over the right, and let me go to the chat here.
Actually,
Let's see what's locals. Tell me how the audio is. Oh, we got Ithaca 37 Cato $5 tip says 2 questions. What drug cocktail do you think they're giving the Hope Ryman, and do you think the COVID shot he took helped speed up his dementia? FYI, some posters on other sites are calling Biden President Corpse. What did I call him? The Walking Dead. I had a term that I used in today's video that I forget now. Robert. Okay, so first of all, what's the book behind you?
it is a reference to what exactly happened with the Titanic, and I have my interpretation of it, along with other information, in a hush hush up this week at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And it's just one of the books. There's not many, but there's a few books that have really done a little mini deep dive on the topic. As usual, the usual suspects might be the people that you should be looking at even more so than the official narrative. But this one book has an interesting theory about that, and does relate to the individual involved.
Well, hold on, Robert. I am too morbidly curious, and I have some like politically incorrect jokes to make that I'm going to hold off on. What the hell could what other than incompetence and arrogance? Were there
maybe it wasn't even the Titanic that sank.
I'll be right back.
Maybe it was a cover-up of a murder conspiracy disguised as a ship sinking that wasn't supposed to lead to what it led to. Maybe it was an insurance fraud scam. Maybe it was an invitation to get into World War I. Maybe it was connected to the Federal Reserve Bank. There's a lot of different angles had to chase down in doing the different alternative narratives out there that you can find summarized in the hush hush. A single individual is connected, and it even concerns a Supreme Court case. So I thought it was apropos because there might have been a Supreme Court conspiracy connected to the Titanic sinking. And we got plenty of Supreme Court conspiracies going on this week.
All right, well, Robert, tell us what we have on the menu for tonight, and we're going to start with so everybody who's new to the channel, I don't think that's very many people. We start off on YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, and vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And after we've given a bit of our time here on YouTube, we vote with our feet, vote with our dollars, and head over to Rumble. But we're going to do the main question tonight on YouTube for sure, and then we'll get over to the other stuff. But Robert, what do we have on the menu for tonight?
So a bunch of Supreme Court cases which top the poll for the top topics at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. We've got homelessness rights. We've got January 6th. We've got the Chevron doctrine. We got the EPA. We got state federal power. We got opioids and bankruptcy. We got the right to a trial by jury. We got social media and state collusive censorship. First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, Seventh Amendment, Eighth Amendment, Article 1, 2, 3, all on the Supreme Court agenda this week, and issues impacting President Trump and impacting the administrative state and its power going forward, as well as the censorship state. So that's just the Supreme Court cases will be the dominant cases discussed, given their considerable consequence from this past week. Then we've got a couple of vaccine case-related updates. One, the PrEP Act is being challenged again in another court for its the way it makes everybody immune from all the injuries caused by various bad actors during COVID, especially the COVID vaccine manufacturers, but not limited to them. And a little update on Tyson Foods, and United Airlines. Then we have one of the most popular topics to discuss tonight. What is the hurdles, legal, financial, political, to Joe Biden stepping down and not being the Democratic Party nominee? Are those hurdles too cumbersome for those that want Biden out to actually succeed in taking Biden out? The Julian Assange is free after many, many years. The inside details of the plea deal, they're cut. And last but not least, come Monday, Steve Bannon is going to be in federal prison through the rest of the election. We'll be discussing that case briefly as well. So those are the top dozen cases for tonight's discussion.
When you say
one little bonus part will be when not to try to extort your lawyer or your former lawyer, which will be a little direct shout out to a certain person who might be trying to do it to a certain lawyer as we speak. And I think they need a little crash course on when that's not a good idea.
I have no idea where that's going, Robert. So I'm gonna think about it and put it together as we go along here. We're gonna start with the obvious big one: the debate, the debacle, and now everybody's saying, "Oh, it was clear as day. The deep state was trying to set Biden up to fail so they can replace him with somebody else." Look, I made the prediction first, and I think it was almost like to a T. But I'm trying to reconcile why they would want Biden out. Why would anyone want Biden out? Unless it's just a question of them knowing he's just too demented to go along. But then if that's the case, who's keeping him in? And what is Jill Biden's incentive to keep pushing her husband instead of just bowing out and letting, I don't know who the next replacement would be. People are accusing CNN of having set Biden up. They're faulting CNN for not having done real-time fact-checking on Joe Biden, as if they would have had enough time to do it. On Donald Trump, as if they would have had enough time to do it at all, because it was just one idiotic statement after another, as though that's the purpose of a 2-on-1 tag team, because Joe Biden is so demented he can't do it himself. It was a disaster by design or by accident. And who would want Biden out at this point in time?
So yeah, we did a live reaction show to the debate, so you can go back and watch that on Rumble. It was definitely a first round knockout for President Trump. 9 out of 10 in terms of his debate performance. Biden around 4 out of 10, just because he didn't die on stage. And he had no memorable gaffes because you couldn't understand what he was saying. So that's the upside to being Mr. Mumbles from Dick Tracy, is nobody has any idea what you're saying, so they can't say it was a gaffe, like talking about sisters raping brothers, just randomly in the middle of the debate. Welcome to the world of Uncle Joe. It's very much, like some, Frank Miller comic, Sin City or something. That's probably a good reference for Joe Biden. Well, watch the boss character in Sin City, and you get a pretty good view of who Biden is. But here's the legal obstacles to all of that. So there's ballot access obstacles. There's campaign finance legal obstacles. And then there's the practical political obstacles, which include a Democratic delegate nominee fight, which relates to the laws governing how the Democratic Party can function, and what an uncontrolled Biden might be, who isn't concerned anymore for re-election in the last 4 months of his presidency, that some people may not necessarily wish for. At Sports Picks put out a bet earlier late last night, for the political betting markets on whether to bet on or against Biden withdrawing. And you can go there to get those picks. They might already be substantially up in the betting markets. But first up, the ballot access problems. So ever since Ross Perot 1996, both parties have conspired to create laws in various states entirely intended to exclude another Ross Perot, to exclude a third-party independent candidate challenger. Right now, they're using those same rules and laws to try to exclude Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. from being on the ballot. Indeed, the Democratic Party has brought suit against him in pretty much every state in which he is sought to be on the ballot. Several of those suits still ongoing. The existence of those suits was the pretext for CNN to deny and exclude Robert Kennedy from this past debate. Well, the state hasn't yet made a ruling on whether you're going to be on the ballot, so we get to exclude you despite it being a violation of federal election laws to do so. What one of their schemes was force everybody to declare early who is going to be on the ballot in order to get access to that ballot. That means, as they were discussing on Fox News and other places this past weekend, there's about 15 states where if they tried to substitute Biden's name, there'd be a serious legal problem of whether any Democratic nominee would appear on the ballot. That's hurdles number one. Hurdle number two, when you raise money for a campaign, it is not transferable to any other campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot use your campaign funds to support another candidate. Consequently, all the money Joe Biden has raised, which is massive, would have to be sent back to the donors.
Look, can I pause you there? If hypothetically Kamala would take over, would
Doesn't
that be
matter.
part? That's not the same campaign.
Nope, not the same campaign. So because the campaign is simply Biden for president, Harris for vice president. So you can't, but that money can't be transferred to Harris for president. Right now, I'll get into a way that some of these legal hurdles could be skipped, but I'll get to that in a second. The next problem is the Democratic Party's rules. If Biden does not voluntarily step down and doesn't voluntarily and volitionally release his delegates are legally bound to vote for him. It means the Democratic Party cannot nominate anyone else. Indeed, due to their Ohio ballot issues, the Democratic Party has already nominated Joe Biden for the presidency. They held a virtual nomination for this. So being able to replace him is exceptionally difficult unless he agrees to doing so, and highly unlikely. Now then you have what happens if he does step down. Well, he doesn't get to declare who his replacement is. The Democratic National Committee in August in 2024, just like 1968, would have a contested convention. And it would be on the convention, but all the delegates would have been Biden loyalists. So he would probably have a lot of influence on who they chose to replace him and succeed him. But that's who would choose it, not party hierarchy, not super delegates, not congressmen and senators, not Biden himself. Those delegates would make a pick. There are plenty of people in the Democratic Party for political reasons who don't want to have don't want to have Chicago 1968 all over again.
Now, for those who don't know anything about Chicago 1968, Robert, what happened?
In Chicago 1968 was where Robert Kennedy Sr. had been assassinated prior to the convention. Lyndon Baines Johnson had stepped down from seeking renomination. So Hubert Humphrey stepped in at the last minute. Many of the Kennedy supporters and the anti-war vote didn't want anything to do with the Johnson administration. They held massive protests throughout the city in Grant Park and elsewhere. The Chicago police went and basically blitzkrieged those kids everywhere they were. Famous story of Pat Buchanan and Norman Mailer sitting in a hotel room overlooking it all from their glass window, watching it happen in live time to great political historical figures. It would go viral, and many people believe the Democratic Party never recovered from that. Then there was all the things happening on the convention floor with Mayor Daley referring to a Democratic senator from Connecticut as "you stupid kike, why don't you shut up?" Other things that were not politically correct then or now. And so the fear is that you would have all the anti-Israel protesters would, if they knew there was a contested convention, they are going to descend on the city of Chicago again. And they're going to have flashbacks to what that insanity was like. They're going to try to intimidate all the Biden delegates into nominating an anti-Israeli candidate or an anti-Israeli platform. They don't want to get anywhere near that. Then you get into the diversity, equity, and inclusion quotas of the Democratic Party, and you have that level of insanity. Then you have the inner California problems, which is that Newsom comes from one wing. He comes from the Pelosi-Feinstein wing of the Democratic Party base. Kamala Harris comes from the Willie Brown wing of the Democratic base. That they hate each other, even though they're both based in San Francisco. And that would be one of the nastiest wars on the planet if Newsom throws his hat in the ring in against Harris. Booty, gay ain't going nowhere. He'll be throwing his hat into the ring, and he has the backing of a lot of high-ranking Obama people. But so they would just see a complete disaster if that is what takes place. And it's because of the legal rules that require Biden to volitionally release them. And those Biden delegates are now the ones deciding the next nominee if it were to go that route.
If I may pause you there, though, is there a rule about unfaithful delegates? Or so? This is one of the memos that internal research.
Yeah, in some state laws, there's some states that have passed those laws. There's the Democratic Party's own rules, which sometimes are also governed by various state laws, depending on the circumstances. And that's what makes these laws and rules enforceable. And it's unlikely the Democratic Party would want to breach them under these circumstances. I mean, they could try, but then they've got their own disaster on the hand, especially if they screw over the black female, Kamala Harris, which takes us to the big political problems with trying to replace Biden. One is, what does an uncontrolled Biden look like? What does a Biden that doesn't have any election to ever worry about ever again look like for 4 months in the buildup to the election?
I'm picturing a lot of crack, hookers, and nudity in the White House, even more than we've already seen. Joe walking around kicking his dogs, Hunter bringing in every hooker that they've ever known. It'll be a full relapse. That's what I would see. Bada bing, bada bing.
Well, I mean, you could get lots of pardons, and don't mess around with commutations or anything else. Pardon all your buddies, pardon all your pals, pardon all your friends and family. You could see him reverse course in who knows what direction. In terms of the Israeli war or the Ukrainian war. He could change his mind on a bunch of stuff that he's only currently doing to placate the political actors who control his reelection prospects. So there's a lot of people in Washington that know they don't have any idea what an unrestricted Biden would do. So they're not all that thrilled with that either, that option. And then you have the other ace in the hole, which is that every other replacement for Joe Biden is more unpopular than Joe Biden. And they just tested it after the debate, and it was still true. Biden was still getting more votes than every other Democratic candidate for the presidency, especially in swing states, particularly in the industrial Midwest. Newsom, Kamala Harris, gay, all the others, they have no chance in the industrial Midwest. And Biden has a vestigial legacy appeal with those voters. So there are massive legal, political, and financial hurdles to replacing Joe Biden. Now, there is a way to do so. There's 3 ways you could do so in terms of not doing it volitionally. If he were to suddenly become officially incapacitated, in that case, he'd have to be removed from the presidency itself under the 25th Amendment. If he were to die, then he can be replaced. The other is he could say, "I'm going to stay on the ticket, but come February 2025, I'm going to step down, so that I'm running to keep the country safe, keep the country secure, keep it away from that terrible Donald Trump. But I'm going to turn over the helm to Kamala Harris come February 2025." That would be a way in which he could sort of walk between the lines and avoid all the financial, political, and legal fallout. Problem, of course, is Kamala Harris is deeply unpopular throughout the country, especially in swing states. So that's the legal hurdles and the practical hurdles to trying to replace old Uncle Joe.
Okay, hypothetically, and I'm not wishing this, although Tyler Fisher, who's been on this channel, was just on Joe Rogan, and he has a good joke. He says, Joe Biden might be the only president who gets assassinated by time or father time. If hypothetically Joe doesn't wake up one morning, the money question, that's still going to be the same problem with all of the donations raised. That not like death is an easy out for the money.
Death and incapacity. No, they would still have to send back the money.
Okay.
So they would have to raise the funds all over again.
Okay.
But the other hurdles, death and incapacity, are exceptions for ballot substitution.
And if it's death or incapacity, then who and how could they substitute for the ballot?
Well,
on the ballot.
In that case, Harris would be the new president. And
I'm an idiot. Okay, fine, because that takes place now, and he's still president. So for the next 2 months, it would be President Harris. She would run, and then
the Biden nominee, the Biden delegates had committed to Biden. Presumably, they would then vote for Harris.
Okay, but so that's
they wouldn't have to though, and even if he's removed or dies, the delegates could pick someone other than Harris to be the nominee.
I guess the question is, from my own self-interested perspective, now it seems very, very unlikely or very difficult for Gavin Newsom to become the candidate. The most likely after Biden himself would be Kamala Harris.
Oh yes.
And then if it is a Gavin, that's going to be a contested convention in Chicago, and it's going to be wild.
He would have to win the delegates, and he'd have to win Biden delegates. And again, he would likely not even win the delegates out of the state of California, because more of them are loyal to either Kamala Harris than to that wing of the party, and more clearly Willie Brown, than they are to the Pelosi, Feinstein, Newsom wing of the party. So if you can't even win your state, how are you going to win a majority of delegates outside of your state? Probably very low. So you would expect if Kamala Harris were to be beat, it would be somebody with a big name from that's not named Gavin Newsom that could do it.
Well, as I look at the markets, Robert, or at least predict it, Michelle Obama is not even listed yet.
Oh, it won't be her because she hates politics and hates people.
Okay. So then it's going to be Hillary Clinton. And I'm looking at her. Let me just throw up a little bit in my mouth here, Robert. Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, now I'm appreciating the dynamic of the Kamala Harris, Willie Brown wing of politics. I thought the only thing relevant there was the two of them stooping. Now I appreciate the demographic of who she represents and why she is Biden.
She's Willie Brown's protege. And Biden, by the way, is more aligned with the Willie Brown wing of the Democratic Party in California. And so you can assume his delegates are too, than the Pelosi Feinstein wing. Willie Brown is the last great political machine leader of the old school type left living in America. And Kamala Harris was his protege and project. He's always wanted one last thing, and that's the White House of the United States.
Let me ask you this, because I had the question. So the 25th can be automatic if death or like medical incapacity. There's no time for Congress, or it would be like sort of an impeachment proceeding to
Well,
have him declare.
incapacity can be challenged by the president, and that I think would only happen if it was indisputable incapacity. In other words, wakes up and doesn't wake
Yeah,
up.
well, but
It is a vegetable effectively.
is there a way for Congress to petition for a 25th declaration? Like go through the
No,
the
that
House?
has to go through the cabinet. Only they can do it. Impeachment is the only way they can remove him.
Okay. Can you impeach someone for being incapable? Bada bing, bada boom. No, you can't. Holy hell, that's very, very complicated. That's much more complicated than I thought it was. What do you think? We'll just make a prediction, Robert. What do you think is going to happen? Does he survive to be on the ticket?
Well, that's why you go to Sports Picks if you want the official pick. I got the official pick up right there, exclusive for those members.
Okay, amazing. Okay, now what other questions did we have from the performance, Robert?
I think that covers it. We'll see if Robert Kennedy did a live response. People can go and watch that to what he would have answered had he been allowed to be in the debate. That was an interesting format and approach to take. You had John Stossel asking him some questions. The next big political thing to come down the pipeline, other than Biden announcing whether he's in or out, will be Trump's vice presidential pick. He said his vice presidential pick was there with him at the debate. A photo was taken later of who was in the debate room, and it excluded some names and confirmed other names. But J.D. Vance was there. Ben Carson was there. So was Tim Scott, Marco Rubio. Somehow Lindsey Graham was invited to be one of the people in his debate room. So that tells you there's still a big guessing game as to who Trump is going to pick to be his VP. Does he pick someone that comes from the establishment wing? Because here's the other interpretation of the Biden debate. If it was a setup, maybe the setup is that Trump's cut a deal. Maybe that's the setup, and they're willing to let Biden take the fall. We'll know what his VP. If he picks someone like.
Oh my God, Robert, that's the next level of 5D conspiracy that I didn't even contemplate until you mentioned it. Was Vivek wasn't in the room?
Nope.
Okay. Damn it. Well, JD Vance, we still got a chance with JD. Let me see.
Yeah, if he picks JD, they picks Ben Carson, then no, I think it's fair to infer no deal has been done. If he picks Tim Scott or Marco Rubio, a deal has definitely been done. And Trump is going to agree to limit how far he goes in his second term. And and that conspiracy theory interpretation would be that that's why the rules were set up to make it look like they were bad for Trump. But anybody who really knew Trump knew those rules actually would make Trump much more effective. No audience to distract him, no mic to distract him, on all the time. He had to be focused, and he was really tuned in. But we'll find out. We may have a very interesting political summer ahead.
The Tim Scott, for anybody who's interested, was once leading in the polls, or at least leading in the market at predicted, and now he's like virtually at the bottom rank at 8 cents. So that's wild. Robert, okay, hold on. I want to make sure I didn't forget to ask any questions about the debate night, the debacle, and the ensuing what's going to happen. I think we got to it. Let me see if there's anything in the chat, and then we're going to get ready to go on over to Rumble, Viva Fry, or vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Do you think they will use that audio tape to force him out of office? Which audio tape are we talking about?
We're talking about the Hur tapes of the interview with the special counsel that Garland has refused to turn over.
I thought they were thinking of that tape of allegedly Trump using the N-word that somehow has not yet surfaced. Biden called brother-sister rape ridiculous. Traffic is ridiculous. Rape is magnitudes worse. That is from Corn Pop's Revenge, who I guess does not like. Okay, so we got that. Robert, let me just do one other thing here, because we're going to go over to the Rumble rants and get these real quick. Like Marty Smith fan, Jill Biden is not leaving ever. What benefit does Jill procure by clinging to Joe as president? Like other than
there's many people who believe that she may be the president right now.
Well, in practice now, what does Jill have to do to get on the ticket? She's not an option yet either.
Well, even better, you have all the power without any responsibility.
We got Squeaky Wheel says, is Biden even legally competent to make the decision to release the delegates? Unless he's 25th or not otherwise. Baird02 says, when would it be too late for Dems to get someone else on the ballot, considering he doesn't die? We already got that. The Engaged Few, if we're going to have a reboot of Chicago 68, can we get an updated version of the Gore Vidal, William F. Buckley TV commentary too? Robert, I don't get that joke. What is that?
We have those two used to debate all the time through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley, and I think they had commentary on I don't know whether it was live or right after it, on the 1968 convention.
Okay, we got
most of it was about the riots outside and the police reaction, but about a quarter of it was about what was happening on the floor.
We got whatever became of the potential, for goodness sake, I just lost it here, of the tainted juror in the bogus Merchant case. We'll get to that afterwards, but there's been no more news other than that letter. Any talk of Biden being anything but the best that ever was is a threat to democracy. I hope the DOJ puts down this insurrection of voices pushing this misinformation about Biden not being perfect. That's from Pinochet's helicopters. Karolevsky, can't the Dems cut a deal to have Joe step down but let Jill continue to sleep in the White House? It seems to be her sole interest. Pasha Moyer, P. Moyer says, Robert, per your recent predictions, how close are you to the line between yay, I was right again, and no, I was right again? And on which side of the line are you? When Biden said Trump banged a porn star, Trump should have said, no, Joe, I sleep with supermodels, not porn stars. And then being reported that Biden family has met and they're encouraging him to say, okay, fine. So we got that. Here's what we're doing now. We're going to end on YouTube and we're going to end on Twitter. Coming over to VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com. Let me give everybody, hold on one second. Let me get some of these tipped questions here before we leave over. We got... Scrolling up, Spam Ranger regarding COVID and vaccines. I'm encouraging people displaying anomalous oxygen dips when attached to high sample rate recording oximeters. My sample size is too small to conclude anything, but I'm requesting that professionals in the audience be attentive to this. It might be a result of injury, and it might be related to the elevated incidence of sudden deaths. Curiously, the low oxygen dips can occur or continue while breathing normally, but end upon changing position. We got prayers for Massey, Buffalo Betsy. It was his Robert Rep
His
Massey, his wife. That's terrible. I heard that. I thought for a second it was his mother. That's So prayers for Tommy for Rep Massey. We got another one that says persona non grata says, please give our condolences to Congressman Massey and his family and friends. Buffalo Betsy, in the situation with Biden replacing Biden, a way to delay or disrupt the election in November. Could they do that if we fight them in court over his candidacy? No. Okay, and then does Chevron's death impact Amos Miller's case? Says Buffalo Betsy. We're going to get to all of that when we go over to Rumble, but I'm going to give everybody the link to, this is the link to Locals first, and the link to Rumble is in the pinned comment, I believe. It's not. Is it? Hold on. Let me just do this one more time before. No, it is. Okay, it's there. Come on over to Rumble. We're going to end it now. Here's the link to Rumble, link to Locals, ending on YouTube, and I'll post the entire stream on Viva Clips and the audio on Viva and Barnes Law for the People on Podbean. Ending on YouTube now. Bada bing, bada boom, done. And ending on Twitter now. Bada bing, bada boom, done. And now, Robert, let's get to the hocus pocus SCOTUS smorgasbord of cases that came out this week. We'll do the SCOTUS stuff, and then we'll get to the other, the trans stuff and whatever. Okay, so let's start with Chevron, just because it was a question that we just had in our Locals community. And because I started reading the decision, and then I remembered why I get very bored reading those decisions. The bottom line, the Chevron rule was showing deference to administrative bodies that by legislation get to sort of enact their own rules and regulations, interpret their own rules and regulations. And there was some threshold that was set before which there could be court intervention in the administrative decisions of these tribunals, but these administrative bodies. And it was a very high threshold before which a court could intervene and say, no, your administrative body interpretation of your own rules is patently unreasonable. That was Chevron deference, and it's been overturned recently in this case. So flesh it out, at least what the Chevron doctrine was specifically, and what will become of the world now that it is no more.
Yeah, so the Chevron doctrine put in 1984 in an environmental case into place a judicial deference to the administrative state. And by the administrative state, we mean bureaucracies where people are not elected to office, not appointed to office. They just simply become office holders, get protected by civil service reform laws, so they cannot be removed by elected officials outside of extraordinary circumstance. And they are supposed to be simply tools of the executive branch enforcing the law and the political decisions made by the elected head of the executive branch. What they're not supposed to be doing is being the legislative branch. They're not supposed to write rules. They're not supposed to write the laws that govern everybody. What they're also not supposed to be doing is being the judicial branch. They're not supposed to interpret the rules as to their legal meaning. They're not supposed to be adjudicating the enforcement of those rules in individual cases. What the administrative state has done in the New Deal, post-New Deal era, judicially ratified first by the Supreme Court, absconding from its constitutional obligations between 1936 and after, in cases like the right to govern, interpreting interstate commerce, so it applies to every little tiny thing that exists in the world, including growing wheat on your own farm, could now be limited by the federal government, even if it's for your own consumption, because it could somehow, by 6 degrees of separation, impact interstate commerce. Try applying that logic to their recent standing doctrine. Well, we'll get to that in a second. But and then it got further and further. So first they said, hey, administrative state, you can intervene in all these places you never could before. So all of a sudden the administrative state had extraordinary reach. Then we started making federal government is a bigger share of the U.S. economy than so-called socialist Venezuela is. The U.S. economy spends more to the government and gives more to the government than the so-called socialist. That should tell you how big the administrative state has become. Step 1, expand their legal powers. Supreme Court abdicate obligation of judicial review and limitation. Step 2, give them tons of money and permanent positions that are immune from elected office removal. Indeed, the idea of the deep state originated from the dual state by a publisher at The Economist over a century and a half ago, further developed and articulated by German and Italian scholars who fled those fascist countries to explain how fascism arose so easily. And they said it's because we've got a dual state, the state of elected officials and this administrative bureaucratic state that's immune from elections and from elected officials. And now, increasingly, immune from constitutional constraint on the subject matter of what they can do or how they do it. The next steps was you can start writing your own rules. You can start interpreting those rules that are often writing your own rules. There's a word for that. It's called legislation. They were usurping, all of a sudden, unelected and executive branch officials were now acting like Congress and usurping the role of Congress. The next step was, hey, you know what? You can also adjudicate your own cases. You can create your own bogus courts, like that so-called California State Bar Court that went after Professor Eastman. These are not constitutionally appointed officials. They don't have to follow any of the rules of due process of law. They can take away your right to a trial by the peers of your vicinage, which is the vicinage and venue and jury trial requirements of the Constitution. And they're the ones who write the rules. They're the ones who administer the rules. They're the ones who enforce the rules and all the rest. So essentially, you had unelected bureaucrats with all the power of the legislative branch, all the power of the executive branch, and all the power of the judicial branch, with no constitutional restraint on the scope of their duties. So this has become an increasing problem for civil society. And fortunately, it also became an increasing annoyance for big corporations. Because if it wasn't a big annoyance for the latter, our Supreme Court would still be sticking their head in the sand. But because these bureaucrats turned out to not only be morally ill-equipped for the task, but in fact, about as cognizant as Joe Biden is currently. I mean, these people are not competent, not capable, and they would just make basic screw ups. The rules would change every other day. You never knew what you were going to deal with. It's just a nightmare dealing with this bureaucratic Byzantine process. So slowly, steadily, the Supreme Court has started to pull back. The most consequential decision was last year, maybe 2 years ago, in a West Virginia case, which said, you know what? If it involves a major policy of economic concern, you administrative agencies have no power of the legislative branch. That has to come from the legislative branch. Only they can write those rules. Only they can interpret those rules in a way that rewrites those rules. They did the same when they said the CDC had no power to enforce an eviction rule in the guise of pandemic control on every landlord in America. The next two big decisions that we've been talking about ever since they were at the lower courts, saying to track these cases. From the district court level, we talked about them. Court of Appeals level, we talked about them. When they were briefed at the Supreme Court, we talked about them. After the oral argument took place, we talked about them. And the prediction made was that the Supreme Court was going to eviscerate the last vestiges of administrative state power. And that's what they did last week. They had two key decisions. The first was the one that officially, formally overturned Chevron and said, no, the administrative state has no authority to act like it has the Article 3 judicial power to interpret the law any more than it has Article 1 legislative power to rewrite the law by interpreting the law. And we hereby say Chevron is wrong, Chevron is gone, that's it. No more deference to the administrative state. Both Article 3 and the Administrative Procedures Act require courts to be exercising judicial power, not unelected bureaucrats. The second one is the SEC decision, which said, you know what? If you're trying to do something that looks like a common law cause of action, like a lot of these civil fines look like old school fraud claims, then that cannot go through your special little courtrooms at the SEC or any other part of the administrative state. Well, we've been talking about this forever, that if you're seeking, I still think this is true for judicial sanctions. If you're seeking something that's monetary remedy, then that should be a jury should determine it. They did that decision today, this week. And those two decisions say administrative state, you no longer have the power to act like the legislature. You no longer have the power to act like the judiciary. You could only do what you were specifically delegated to do by Congress and by the elected head of the executive branch, and you can go no further. It is a death nail to the power of the administrative state in America, and it's going to apply to a bunch more cases to come. We're just beginning to see the ramifications of the reversal of the Chevron doctrine.
Because it's amazing. Like I say, America judicially seems to be going in one direction, say the opposite direction of Canada, where you have these administrative tribunals, total deference from the court system, where they don't get involved, and you get these rogue, unelected officials and these entities issuing the most insane rulings ever, and you much of a pushback at all. And in the States, it seems like you have it. What is going to be the threshold for judicial oversight? Like these administrative bodies, they're going to make their own. They're going to make internal decisions in interpreting their own rules. Is it just the right decision? The courts will get involved anytime there's a dispute, and it's going to be the correct decision as determined by a court?
The administrative agency has to be acting within the delegated powers of Congress and the choices of the elected head of the executive branch. And what they can't be doing can't be legislative power or judicial power. If it is, then they are acting outside their authority, and they can be challenged in court accordingly. And the analogous provisions would apply to state agencies operating in the same way, since analogous case law would be applicable to them as well. So what it neuters the administrative state, reduces it back to the processing people they're supposed to be, to the low-level administrative people they're supposed to be. No more legislative function, no more judicial function. And this is consistent with other cases where they say you have to be removable by the president, or you are also can't have the authority you're usurping and claiming to. So it's the end of the constitutional approval of the administrative state in its current form and in its most pernicious mechanism. And we saw another live example of it this week EPA was trying to interpret the Clean Air Act, usurping judicial power, usurping legislative power, to shut down, to force a one-size-fits-all policy on every single state that was going to screw over a bunch of states. They challenged it, and originally under the deferential preference given, the EPA would have got away with it. And the court said, no. This violates the Administrative Procedures Act, and the Administrative Procedures Act requires us as a court to interpret the law, not allow any deference to anybody else's interpretation of that law. And they said, and the APA requires meaningful answers, reasoned answers, and these agencies aren't giving those. And so it overturned the biggest, most aggressive effort of the EPA to enforce a kind of cuckoo environmental plan on a one-size-fits-all environmental plan on a bunch of states. Now, there was one, the three liberals, of course, dissented. Who do you think was the other judge who dissented on the Clean Air Act?
I'm going to say Amy Coney Barrett, if I had to take one guess.
What a lucky guess you have.
I've learned. I'm a slow learner, but I learn, Robert.
Indeed. This week, that Politico headline from last week, flagged by one of the members of our board at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, was in fact predictive. In many key decisions this week, Justice Amy Coney Barrett sided with the liberals and opposed, and it was in every case she sided with the liberals was not the civil rights cases. As I also predicted, Justice Jackson repeatedly this week sided with the conservatives when it came to certain civil liberties cases. Justice Barrett was on the other side when she wanted to virtue signal, when she wanted to give even more power to the state, and the rest. The other thing we saw was what we had predicted 3 years ago, which was that the court is forming three branches. There's the liberals, there's the constitutional conservatives, and then there's the corporatist institutionalist. And the presidential immunity decision likely coming down on Monday, we will see what it'll all depend on what the institutionalists decided. Can two of those three side with President Trump, then we're going to get a great immunity decision that puts an end to the lawfare. If they don't, then we'll get some other decision. But as you talked about at the time, to the much criticism of a lot of so-called conservatives, Amy Coney Barrett is not a Scalia conservative. Amy Coney Barrett is Justice Roberts in a dress. And she's proving she at times is even worse than Roberts.
I just kicked my foot really hard. I'm sitting on a piano bench and it rocks and it's uncomfortable and it's got no back and it's a little wooden circle that's really painful in my butt. I didn't understand it at the time. This is like where you require more knowledge and more information. I didn't understand what people said when they said liberals, one third constitutionalist, and 1/3 institutionalist. And now I understand it specifically. I mean, it opened my eyes reading the dissenting opinion in the January 6th obstruction case. It's not just look, I'll say there is only one decision that makes sense in that case, and it's the majority decision, just by virtue of the fact that, you know, the issue there was whether or not subsection 2 of 1512C, when it came to obstruction and by any other corrupt means, was such a broad net that it basically rendered the first half of that provision as though it had never been drafted. And standard canons of interpretation are that a legislator doesn't draft something to say nothing. And so if you read a provision of law that basically renders null and without effect or moot academic another provision of law, it's the wrong interpretation. And so the majority decision comes and says, look, if that's the interpretation to give to the obstruction charge, destroys, alters, falsifies, or by any other corrupt means, and it's so broad and so ambiguous that it eats up the first provision, that's an unreasonable interpretation of it, and we can't give it that broad scope. And then I read Amy Coney Barrett's decision, the dissenting opinion, and she basically says, well, that's what Congress said, and I'll just cover my ears, block my whatever it is, cover my eyes, block my ears, and it's not my job to interpret an ambiguous provision of law. So the Jan 6 case, it's the big one on the obstruction charges being enhanced to a felony. Many people convicted under it and many others charged under it. The Fisher case, and they came down 6-3 and said, no, this is never the interpretation that was intended to be given to this obstruction. It's got to be something concrete. and not protesting being by other means interfering with an official congressional proceeding. Can you try to make sense of ACB's dissent?
Well, I mean, it's exactly what we predicted. I think we were the only ones to predict it. Yeah, and people can go out there and look and find the people that told you Barrett would be on the wrong side and Justice Jackson, the liberal Democratic Biden appointee, would be on the right side. That was the only one. I got so much blowback. Oh, you're nuts, Barn. The so-called legal analysts couldn't analyze that. I mean, I think Shipwrecked Crew, when he's not busy drunk and tweeting dumb things towards Julie Kelly, was busy accusing me of being a fraud for saying Amy Coney Barrett wasn't going to be the greatest constitutionalist of all time. She was always a fraud. And you could tell she was a fraud if you just read her cases or knew her history. And you could tell from Justice Jackson that she would surprise conservatives on certain civil rights and civil liberties cases. And she has consistently. I mean, the number one, she concurs with Gorsuch more than Barrett does. That should give you an idea of the difference between those two. Barrett's interpretation is ludicrous. Barrett is one of these law school students who had to memorize her way through law school. All right. She's not intuitively smart at all. She's someone, if you gave an exam to right on the spot, she'd fail. Right. What she's good at is studying really super hard and super duper and memorize everything. And not understanding anything intuitively, not understanding policy at all, because some of her argument is asinine. It's absurd. I mean, there are basic, for those people that don't know it, they're called canons of statutory construction. These are axiomatic rules you use when you're trying to interpret what a legislative act was intended to do and what it covers and what it doesn't. Now, in the criminal context, as the 6 justices, the constitutional conservatives, they got Roberts and Kavanaugh to come along, and then they got Jackson added on, agreed, said if even just look at statutory canon, every rule of statutory canon requires us to interpret this in a very limited way. You have to interpret any set of words in the context of the words before them and after them, in the context of the statute as a whole, in the context of the policy they were trying to prohibit, and in terms of other obstruction statutes also written by Congress across the entire context and scope. And if you use those very simple rules of statutory canon, every single one tells you that the defendant was right and the government was wrong in interpreting the obstruction statute. Every single one.
Let me bring it up. We'll read it in real time and to illustrate how absurd the ACB Amy Coney Barrett interpretation of it. This is under the provision of tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant. And we'll just skip right to it is.
Well, notice how it starts, right? About witnesses, about informants, about in other words, it's all of these obstruction statutes have to deal with prohibiting someone from corrupting the integrity of an adjudicative process, an investigative process.
Now, they call this the Sarbanes-Oxley, or they call this the Enron provision. My knowledge of the legislative history is not that great. Is it the entire provision or specific sections? Like this entire provision was
large parts of the entire law. Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at here, 1982. All right, so that 86 and whatever. Okay, so
what is they added all of these relevant provisions in 2002 as part of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act to deal with securities fraud when various companies were doing things to corrupt the investigative process. And they wanted to reach those things because sometimes there would be creativity in the way that worked. And that was the anticipation that the government was conducting an investigation at the administrative or legal or Justice Department basis, and that the person they're trying to investigate is doing things to corrupt the investigative process, to obstruct the investigative process in ways that are not within their rights and remedies in terms of the adversarial process.
So reading that and knowing the history, which was fleshed out in the majority decision, 1512C says, whoever corruptly, 1, alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record, document, or other object, or attempts to do so with the intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding,
and, or here's what this was. Arthur Anderson got away with this because at the time this law wasn't there. Arthur Anderson, the accounting firm for Enron, knew an SEC was subpoena was coming the next day because of all the things that Enron was accused of doing. So they went and found the old Hillary Clinton shredder special and went shred, 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 shred. But because no subpoena had yet come, they couldn't be criminally prosecuted for it. That annoyed Congress. So they were like, let's add, if you intend to obstruct something that you know is coming, then we're going to call that a crime. That's the point behind this. Not at all thinking dealing with a January 6th event.
Well, and the issue with the Enron case is that they had all these documents in their possession, so they weren't intimidating witnesses, they weren't threatening people, they just destroyed what they could get their hands on and got away with it. So alters, destroys, mutilates, etc., yada yada yada. And then subparagraph 2 of section 1512C says, otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so shall be fined or imprisoned for 20 years. So, Robert, they applied this felony charge to protesters.
They took something that was meant, okay, if you're doing something like this, but you found a creative way for it to be right outside of the strict definition of the words, then anything like what you just saw is also a crime. That's what the words otherwise means. According to Amy Coney Barrett, otherwise means, anything. You didn't need any of that statute. You made it a crime for anybody to do anything that could in any way possibly be perceived or conceived as obstructing a proceeding. And that's it. It was an asinine interpretation. She's not a constitutionalist. She's not a legal scholar. She's a corporate whore, and she's a phony, fake, and fraud, and Trump should be embarrassed for putting her on the bench. That's the bottom line.
Robert, who did you suggest instead of Amy Coney Barrett? I forget her name now. I remember she was, I believe she was Latina.
Who's been a very good judge on the 11th Circuit. Amy Coney Barrett said Jacobson was a good decision. She approved the Illinois lockdowns. Trump should be embarrassed for making a stupid decision. If he wants to be president, then he needs to assure people he won't repeat stupid decisions like this one. I can read the indictment of Trump's officials by just quoting Donald Trump on those officials and how they were. And then things like Barrett being the utter embarrassment she is, the one vote that no 2020 election issues weren't reviewed. The one reason 2020 election issues were not reviewed was Amy Coney Barrett. And here she is issuing a horrendous decision on January 6th that shows she can't do basic law. She's not a basic law scholar at all. She's an embarrassment to the profession of practice of law. She can't read statutes. She can't interpret statutes. She can't read the Constitution. She can't interpret the Constitution. It is an asinine interpretation. And anyone who defends it is also a disgrace. Because here's the other problem is the 6 justices noted, including liberal Justice Jackson, which was, and by the way, she would have been the one in place of Barrett had Ginsburg died later. And guess who would have been better on criminal issues? She would not. And on constitutional issues and on statutory interpretation issues in this context. She, not Barrett. That should be an embarrassment to everybody who pushed and promoted Barrett. But the other reasons is the First Amendment and the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Under the Fifth Amendment, the rule of lenity, the requirement of due process, you are obligated as a court to interpret the law in a way most favorable to the defendant. She completely ignores it because she doesn't understand the Constitution and she doesn't care about it. And then the First Amendment, as Gorsuch noted in writing the opinion, this has ridiculous ramifications for people who engage the government on a regular basis. You could lock up protesters. You could lock up lobbyists. You could lock up activists. You could lock up anybody for 20 years because that's insane. But not according to Barrett because she doesn't give a rat's rear end about the Constitution. That's what a disgrace she is. And every senator who voted for, every congressman who backed should be embarrassed. Every public legal analyst should be embarrassed. This is the disgrace they put on the bench of Amy Coney Barrett, who would greenlight some of the most preposterous interpretations of law for some of the worst public policy imaginable.
Robert, while I find a section that I want to bring up from the judgment, also flesh out how the hell were they charged with this? Like, who makes the decision to charge people under a novel and untenable interpretation of the law, drag them through years and convictions only to have it overturned? Who made the decision to say, yeah, this is how we're going to interpret that section of obstruction?
The district attorney in charge of the District of Columbia. That's who. And he's notoriously corrupt. And Julie Kelly has highlighted his corruption all the way through. And credit to Julie Kelly, who has stayed active in this case promoting these defendants' cases, from exposing courts, including courts that Trump appointed, and exposing how incompetent many of them were, how corrupt many of them were, how prejudiced many of them were, how disgraceful the jury pool has been, how corrupt the prosecutors have been. There's been none of this nonsense law enforcement deference that just, if they're blue, it must be true. None of that nonsense. Exposing these people engaging in bad behavior as they have done. And so credit to her for it, for covering all of it. But it's all because of the corrupt prosecutor, who's a very political prosecutor and a very corrupt prosecutor. This is the guy trying to put grandmas in prison. Yep. While they're letting out rapists, murderers, thieves, burglars, assaulters on a daily basis in the District of Columbia. Why does that district still exist? Why hasn't Trump called for its abolition? Not a big new fancy FBI building, President Trump, that you're going to make sure it's really nice and connects real easily to DOJ. How clueless are you? Are you still asleep at the wheel? The decisions like this are horrendous, and they didn't have to happen. And they happened because Trump made a dumb decision, like he made many, 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 many dumb personnel decisions in his first term. And it wasn't helped by people not holding him to account. It isn't helped now by people not holding him to account. That if we want a better second term, then these mistakes need to be highlighted. Now's the time to do it, because he's in the catbird seat for re-election or for a second term.
Let me bring it up here. This is the last bit of her reasoning. It says there's no getting around it. Section 1512 is an expansive statute. Yet Congress, not this court, weighs the pros and cons of whether a statute should sweep broadly or narrowly. As if the court has no role in interpreting laws. Once Congress has set the outer bounds of liability, the executive branch has the discretion to select particular cases to prosecute within those boundaries. By atextually narrowing 1512C2, the court has failed to respect the prerogatives of the political branches. I mean, that's bullshit, Robert.
No, it's completely. I mean, it violates every statutory canon of judicial interpretation of the law.
By her own,
she's lying about what Congress intended. Amy Coney Barrett is a liar. That's who she is. She's been that way her whole life. That's how she got to her job. She comes from the Southern aristocracy. And it's sad and pitiful that she dog-walked Trump just as bad as Fauci dog-walked Trump. This is proof of it. And I had to wait a couple of years for the proof of what I was saying 3-4 years ago, when I was screaming and the only one out there screaming, she's going to be a disaster. She's terrible. She's horrendous. If you care about the Constitution, you must oppose her. And I got 2 responses. Oh, no, Barnes, you're making it up. She's going to be a Scalia clerk. You don't understand. She's going to be a constitutionalist, Barnes. People can't read the law. And the other response was, how dare you question President Trump in this key time? Well, our job for President Trump is to never question or criticize anything he ever does. Guess how that worked out? So did it help him get a challenge to the election after 2020? Nope. Thanks to that decision. So it's a ridiculous interpretation she makes. Ridiculous. Oh, I'm standing by what Congress did. No, you didn't. You're lying about what Congress did.
Well, Robert, you were right. And no, it's just like, if following her rationale, the courts never need to interpret laws. I mean, the Congress drafted them and just apply them. How do you apply them? The way they're drafted. It's a very circular logic.
But not only that, what she's really saying is let the executive branch decide what they mean and have no review of it. Just like she did with the Clean Air Act and dissented on that one and wanted to screw over states because she wanted to signal she's with the environmentalists. Don't you worry. But what she really means is she's with the administrative state where and when she can be. She wasn't able to back up Chevron because that doctrine had been eviscerated by every respected jurist, by legal mind who reviewed it with any degree of objectivity or independence. But what she's really saying is the executive branch, the prosecutors, should get however they interpret the law is what we should agree to. Because you're pretending I'm just deferring to what Congress said. No, you're not. You're interpreting their words in words that directly contradict what they said. She's the one having an extrajudicial interpretation of congressional legislation. She's using the word otherwise to no longer mean otherwise.
Well, it's a good decision. So practically speaking, I know I've asked you this privately. What happens to all of the people who were convicted under that statute? And what happens to those facing charges? They send it back for remand.
Yeah, they all have to be reviewed for whether the charges were even sufficient. They have to be reviewed for whether now cases have to be dismissed. convictions and verdicts vacated, sentences vacated. So in some cases, they will do remand for resentencing. In other cases, it will be remand for starting from scratch. In some cases, the key verdict is thrown out and there's nothing else left. It is a massive win for every single January 6th defendant who's had to go through all this politicized nonsense, despite Amy Coney Barrett's best efforts to greenlight this and rubber stamp it. And hopefully, and we'll see how the lower courts do. I'm sure the Justice Department will try to find a way to weasel around the decision. I'm sure the more rogue partisan courts will do the same. Only one judge of all the DC judges made the same determination. We talked about his decision several years ago. And only one. All the rest of them should be embarrassed, including the Trump appointees. They should be embarrassed. How could you not understand the law at this level? If this was a law school exam, every single one of those judges failed, because this was basic statutory construction. And then after you do that, another rule of statutory construction is to interpret the law in such a way that it is constitutional. And look at the First Amendment, look at the Fifth Amendment. And that required the rule of lenity limit the interpretation and scope of a criminal law. First Amendment, make sure you don't prosecute innocent conduct that is otherwise targeted for politicized reasons. So the great decision by the majority of the court, horrendous dissent that reveals what a disgrace Barrett is, and expect her to get worse as time goes on. I predict now she will be the worst Republican nominee since Justice Souter. And I think she'll end up worse than Souter on the bench. And that's Trump's last appointee that he put on the bench will be one of the worst of all time. For the Canadian schnooks who might not appreciate the Souter reference, why was Souter so bad? Because he was a liberal Democrat. That's why. So he wasn't the constitutional Republican they sold him as. Robert, okay, before we get on to the next one here, let me bring up some of the Rumble rants because I saw a purple one, which I know what it means. Sammy says, Ben Shapiro called Nikki Haley his spirit animal, and he fawned over Amy Coney Barrett during her appointment. So it's official. Ben Shapiro's judgment is terrible. LOL. Oh, yeah. I don't think Barnes is going to disagree. True. It's always been true. PJ Park JD, I think I know who you are. Well, I think that you're on Twitter as well. Chevron was like trigonometry. They made you suffer through it in con law, but you never use it again. Now it's gone. Lucky first years. An observation says, does the 7th Amendment decision cover the phony IRS courts and require jury trials there? We'll get into more detail on that in a second. And then we got an observation says, tagging himself, man. Okay, thank you, an observation. King of Biltong. Good afternoon from Anton's Meat Neat. Free shipping for your biltong using code VIVA on biltongusa.com and antonusa.com. Help us fight climate change, reduce the cows, eat more biltong. Biltong, for those of you who don't know, is a South African form of beef jerky. It's freaking delicious. Hands down, objectively, and I eat probably too much of it. Git Fiddler says, keep up the great work. And T1990, what can we do to make it so these bureaucrats can get fired? Will this affect the ATF? 10x bull, Robert. The Chevron case, will it impact the ATF? Yes, in part, yes. Panther AI, as crazy as it might sound, Emma Obama's refusal to engage in politics might make her the best option for everyone else's perspective. The thing is, they could force Michelle in, Robert. Like if I think dirty, deep state nastiness, they've got a family. They can blackmail them into running. No? I suppose, but she hates politics and hates people, so that would not be wise. And remember, there's Kamala Harris who wants to be president, Hillary Clinton that wants to be president. There's nobody really getting through those two, in my opinion. Becca 2 says, who do the people sue for being misled and lied to about this administration? Just turn off the news don't watch MSM or legacy media anymore. They just turn them out and don't give them your eyes or your money. I'm not your buddy guy says, was Vivek at the debate? I don't know. We said no. Personally, I was hoping Trump would pick him for VP and Barnes for AG. Jill Biden is not leaving ever. I'm Marty Smith fan. And okay, we got that already. All right, Robert. So what is the next SCOTUS decision from the week that we're going to get to? Well, before we get to the jury trial one, let's get to the decision that Justice Barrett authored with the 3 liberals and the 2 institutionalists this week. How the Biden administration was greenlit on its social media censorship campaign. Oh, Lordy. All right. So there's
discussion as to the scope and extent of this case. This is the Biden v. Missouri, where standing. And Robert, I've listened to your Bourbon with Barnes on Viva Barnes Law to make sure I pick the brains of everybody. There's others out there. Good Logic was saying, this is not as catastrophic a decision as some, and I'm not saying you or me, Robert, it's not catastrophic because it didn't render any determination on the merits. It's just a cheap cop-out to wait for another day for that to happen. They determined no standing on the plaintiffs, the state plaintiffs, and the individual plaintiffs to get a TRO, temporary restraining order, despite the massively well-documented evidentiary basis of that case, just because the basic rationale was that the plaintiffs had suffered, in the past, but before the impugned actions, and it's not clear that what the social media companies did after the state got involved was as a result of their coercion, that their fears of future censorship are not illusory, but prospective. And as such, they didn't have standing to even petition the courts in the first place. But I might be oversimplifying that because it's been sent back for remand with a decision in accordance with that judgment. The bottom line, though, they did say that the states didn't have the legal standing to sue, nor did the individual plaintiffs, because the social media companies were doing it before the actions and their fears for the future were prospective. So I might be oversimplifying it, but it's a load of crap. I mean, what the hell? What does anyone have to have by way of standing? I know what your feeling is on standing, and now I totally understand it, because case in controversy, bullshit. The fear that they might do it in the future is a case in controversy. Whether or not there's ambiguity as to whether the social media companies were doing it at the behest of or the coercion of the state, even though they had done it before, that's a matter of, a matter of fact to be determined later. But I don't know what standing anybody needs now to sue. But what is your take on this, and tell us how bad it is?
Just briefly, we're having an interesting conversation in the live chat at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. One common refrain I've heard from conservatives and Trump supporters is not to blame him for bad personnel or policy choices. And my question to those people is like, this is the Michael Tracy criticism of the MAGA movement. He's like, every time Trump does something terrible, you tell me it really wasn't Trump who did it. But we should absolutely vote for Trump because why? So if the president isn't responsible for his personnel or policy choices, what are we voting for them for then? To talk in front of the cameras? To be funny sometimes? They absolutely have to be held accountable for their personnel and policy choices, celebrated for their good ones, condemned and criticized for their wrong ones. And especially with someone like Trump, they'll repeat it. Like one response was Barnes, Trump's not a lawyer. He doesn't understand these things. He's not a military person either. He's not a police officer either. So is he now immune from every bad decision he makes about 99.999% of his job? Why are we going to fight for him? Why are we battling for him in the court of public opinion? If he's going to make bad choices, then why? So the goal is that he make better choices, that he make some choices that are good ones, and then he make better ones. But if you've ever studied Trump at all, the only way he makes better decisions is when people criticize him when he makes bad ones. If you don't criticize him, you're guaranteeing him he makes another bad one. So just briefly on that, but there's more discussion about it. Live debate at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. The horrendous standing decision, people may remember my introduction to the audience to the doctrine of standing goes back to the 2020 election cases. I think Uncivil Law did about like an hour or something, cussing and screaming about it.
I wasn't gonna name any names. I don't like the infighting. There were a number of members of the law.
Infighting. I just thought I thought it was funny as heck. But it became like a mini debate in aspects of so-called LawTube, which other than Robert Gouvet and Good Logic is mostly useless these days. But the reason why I was critical of standing is twofold. It's a made-up doctrine, didn't exist before 1920. It ain't in the Constitution. And if you have to, if somebody keeps telling you something about the standing doctrine and they aren't quoting you the Constitution, that's a sign that maybe it's not really a constitutional doctrine, that they're not using the Constitution's own words. And there's a reason they're not using the Constitution's own words, because the Constitution's own words don't have the word standing in them. Nothing like standing It says the judicial power shall, mandatory, obligated, shall be extended to all cases or controversies, all that concern certain subject matter. If it arises under the Constitution, arises under federal law, arises under a treaty, involves citizens of 2 states, involves Indian tribes, so on and so forth. So there's no question that this is a case. There's no question that it's a controversy involving the United States as a party. There's no question that and either one of those means the courts have to hear them under the Constitution, under Article 3. And there's no question that it concerns issues arising under the laws of the United States and arising under the Constitution of the United States. So how did Justice Barrett, with her institutionalist allies, Roberts and Kavanaugh, think about it, 2 of 3 Trump's appointees, bad on this issue. And just think about that, folks. I mean, he needs to drastically improve. And if he's going to nominate someone like Tim Scott or Marco Rubio as his VP, should people really go to bat for him, to vote for him? I mean, I won't be in a good position to advocate for him if that's his VP choice, because that means he's making the same bad decisions, if not worse, than before. And who cares about that version of Trump? That's a mostly useless version of Trump. It's a marginal improvement over Joe Biden, not a great improvement. And that's saying something, given how bad a President Biden has been. So but there you go. They come in and they say, with the 3 liberals, for their ideological reasons, who love censorship, that all the Biden government administration could do whatever they want to coerce private actors to censor your speech on the most important public forums that exist. And they do it right on the eve of the 2024 election. So you can be guaranteed they're going to ramp it up. They already are towards Robert Kennedy. Kennedy, more than Trump, was going to be the first target. And right away, anybody who shares Robert Kennedy's response on the debate is being shut down on Facebook and Instagram. And they're either being suspended or something else. We got people on our board who've shared older things that have nothing to do with Kennedy, but older things deal with COVID vaccine and other issues, who suddenly saw their Facebook posts and pages starting to be removed again. Mm-hmm. And this is what Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh and Roberts made sure of.
But I don't understand the logic. I mean, you have people who they've arguably been censored, because I can appreciate they're going to say, well, the social media companies were doing it before. They were doing it on their own. The massive collusion is just coincidental. How do they say that they don't have the standing to pursue the claim?
Well, I mean, the first problem is standing doesn't exist. There is clearly a case or controversy. So what they've done is they invented this, and they invented this in the 1920s. And any legitimate, credible historical or legal scholar that studied the issue will tell you they change their mind all the time on standing, because it's a Pontius Pilate pretext for not hearing a case they don't want to hear, for not dealing with an issue they don't want to deal with. That's all it is. The same judge will issue 5 different contrary rulings on standing. As Alito and Thomas and Gorsuch in their dissent make clear, they said, look at the census case we took just a few years ago to screw Trump from being able to collect whether somebody's a citizen on the censorship form. We had a 6 degrees of separation version of standing. There was no causation or injury there of any kind. And we said, oh, yeah, no problem, standing. Anybody who studied standing, that's why I say I never respect someone who takes standing seriously. It's because no self-respecting judge has ever taken it seriously. And you can see that in that they've contradicted themselves on the same doctrine. It's not historically rooted. That if you study, like somebody said, oh, boy, they're just enforcing the Constitution. That's what they're required to do. Tell me where standing is in the Constitution. Well, I can't find it. Well, but it's always been there, and the courts have always said so. Okay, cite me one case before 1920. They can't. Huh. So none of our founding father generation, or their next generation, the generation after them, the generation after them, or the generation after them could find standing in the Constitution. But these groups of frauds could. And it's the Pontius Pilate pretext, in reference to who Pontius Pilate was, for those that don't know.
Well, so he was the man who he gave the order to crucify Jesus, and his explanation was that, well, I'd love to do something about it, but the mob has spoken, basically.
Yeah, yes, I would love to be involved, but it's not my responsibility. I wash my hands of it. I'm going to let someone else make the choice, and I didn't make the choice. And that's what the courts love to do in these kind of cases. When they wanted to avoid the 2020 election, they cited standing. When they wanted to avoid the FDA lying to kids about the dangers of vaccines, they cited standing. Now, when they want the Biden administration to censor speech at scale, they cite standing. And it's now you get into the specifics of it. They're like, oh, the platforms are doing the bad things, not the governments. That's not what they're complaining about. They're complaining about what the government.
Well, that was the premise of the suit, is that they're doing it, but at the coercion or at the pressure of the administration. And there was ample evidence to confirm that.
Yes. And this, by the way, explained there was a precursor, a preface that this was going to take place. And that was when they excluded Robert Kennedy. Remember, Robert Kennedy moved to intervene to join it. Scalia dissented from them not letting him in. It's because they know Scalia, that they would not have been able to make the arguments about standing to Kennedy that they would be about all the rest. Kennedy was specifically targeted. Kennedy was targeted more after the Biden administration asked them to than what he was before. Kennedy hadn't been targeted on Instagram at all until Joe Biden came along. Their new rule is, as a government actor, don't do anything formal or official. Get somebody to start doing the bad behavior constitutional beforehand. Then when you come in and give them motivation and excuse to do it, we'll say, no, that wasn't you doing it. That was them doing their own independent action. And we'll say no standing. Now, they claim no standing is to, they didn't say that these actions were First Amendment approved. I mean, that tells you how badly unconstitutional the government's action is. They couldn't even find any constitutional excuse for their conduct to say so. Not in a concurring opinion, not in any opinion. Second, they didn't limit damages claims or other claims. Now, there's other things that limit damages claims, of course. They just limited injunctive relief claims. They said you can't enjoin it. You can't prevent it or prohibit it because there's not a likelihood of future injury. Now, again, they excluded Robert Kennedy from the case because Robert Kennedy could show imminent future injury. I'm running for president and they're censoring me. That's why they excluded him and ran for cover on his case. But that doesn't stop a lower district court from going with Robert Kennedy anyway and enjoining this behavior. The other bad thing they did was on the First Amendment. The bad part of the First Amendment decision is they limited the right to hear to, quote, there needs to be a concrete, specific connection to the individual speaker you want to hear from. Otherwise, you have no First Amendment right to hear beyond that.
And what does that look like in reality?
It drastically limits the ability to bring suit and allows massive levels of censorship against the right to hear. So they eviscerated the right to hear. They created in standing. They created a doctrine that now is so broad that it's impossible to sue whenever the courts don't want you to be able to sue. Now, you can overturn this with congressional legislation. Congress could specifically give jurisdiction to the courts to hear these matters, and how it defines case or controversy. It's not a guarantee the courts would still have to take the case. They may try to find a way around it, but generally speaking, when Congress speaks in that regard, the courts don't try to slap back and say, no, we're going to ignore you too. And I think what should happen is Congress should pass law. But Robert Kennedy's on board with it. No reason why Donald Trump shouldn't be on board with it. And a whole bunch of other people shouldn't be on board with it, which is if you are harmed by the government and in ways that violate constitutional rights, then you should have the right to sue in courts for relief and remedy. And that should be particularly true when you file a citizen's petition. This is because our citizen's petition is the right to petition for redress of grievances protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. It's the right that constitutional scholar Amy Coney Barrett couldn't even remember before Congress when she was being sworn in to be a Supreme Court justice. You think you at least would remember the 5 provisions of the First Amendment, but she couldn't even remember that. Maybe that was a red flag for people out there that didn't want to listen. Congressional reform could help. It's not a perfect help because of how ludicrous now the courts are interpreting the word cases. my extended rant in the Barnes brief at vivabarneslaw.locals.com this week was on, if you read the legal history, their interpretation of the word cases is absurd. It's not originalist at all. It has no foundation in any originalist interpretation. So all the people told me, oh, Amy Coney Barrett's going to be an originalist. You were wrong. Send in your apologies, courtesy of support of 1776lawcenter.com, where we're going to be fighting her nonsense for the next decade. But embarrassing ruling, embarrassing for the court, embarrassing for the rule of law, embarrassing to have a functioning constitutional democracy in this 2024 election. But it is where we're at.
And explain this to the stupid people out there like me. Like someone is going to one day have a bona fide standing recognized claim. They're going to have to start from scratch and go through all of the loops and procedure that had gone through to get to the Supreme Court to adjudicate on this. How in the name of economy of justice do they get away with saying, we know what you've done. You've gone through every level of the court now, evidentiary hearings, and we're going to punt it back and say one day someone else with a good standing is going to come. How do they justify it that way?
It gets them out of jail for now. All right. And it was the key problem for the Supreme Court was that the Fifth Circuit had already, and the federal district court had already stopped the government from doing this. That's what forced them to get involved. And then they cherry picked it in such a way that they could gut the injunction even though there were people who had standing to reach the merits. And it's really an abdication of their constitutional obligation. The judicial power says shall extend to all cases and controversy. And every single justice up there has been guilty of using this as an excuse to dump cases they don't like. Every single one of them. It's just this is one of the more egregious examples of it. And because of its immediate public policy consequence. That the green light to mass censorship is fully back in business through election day, and it's another area where Trump should speak out more. That he's going to oppose it. That he'll support Rand Paul's legislation to prohibit it, to defund it, to make it a crime if any government agent or individual engages in it. He's talked about it sporadically, but he failed to even mention it during the debate a day after the decision was issued. So and if it's not on the top of his mind, it doesn't exist. So there needs to be continued effort in Trump camp. Political freedom matters to a lot of people, and just like financial freedom and medical freedom and food freedom matter to a lot of people. We polled the whole country on it, and Richard Barrett's poll showed people care more about the right to buy food from a farmer without government permission than they do about abortion. Sorry, liberal Democrats. They care more about political freedom and being able to speak their minds and not being censored than they do about abortion. They care more about financial freedom, the right to not be dependent on the Federal Reserve, and the right to access to Bitcoin and crypto and the like, and to be able to exchange currency as they see fit, than they do about abortion. They care more about the right to sue drug companies for causing injury from their vaccines than they do about abortion, than almost any other issue in the country. That's how significant these issues were. So hopefully President Trump uses this bad case as an opportunity for meaningful legislative reform.
All right, Robert, before we get on to the next subject, let me just bring this up one more time in Viva Barnes. Well, we're at Viva Fry on Rumble. Almanac says, Viva, Robert, any thoughts on the new book of the Kennedys by Maureen Callahan? Ask Not, supposedly detailing severe degeneracy by JFK, RFK, and even RFK
Well, I
Jr.?
can give you RFK Jr.'s point of view is that if you track and trace the history of it, you will track and trace it to the CIA. That almost every one of those really nasty stories about his father and uncle come from CIA sources. So if you trust them, then you probably trust the people accusing President Trump of being a fraudster and a criminal rapist.
Barnes, you need unanimous jury for convictions. If a state fails to convince a unanimous jury of guilt, shouldn't jeopardy attach because you're innocent until proven guilty? Agape novels.
That's my view. The pitiful courts have refused to enforce it that way.
Sean Joe, I love you guys. Thank you very much. And then Becca 20, Barnes, who do you like for VP? And thank you. We know Barnes likes JD.
I mean, what makes who I like the best personally, JD Vance, Ben Carson. I think Vivek would be fun. Who I think would be good for Trump electorally, JD Vance or Ben Carson. Who do I think would be good for a Trump presidency. Be insurance from impeachment, insurance from assassination.
J.D. Vance and Ben Carson.
Right? It happens to align. Just see whether, just think about it. Do you think the CIA will blink twice about assassinating Trump if Tim Scott is his VP? There'll be no fear there. And some people say, why do I say there's a deal with the deep state if Trump puts Tim Scott or Marco High Heels Rubio on the ticket? It's because if I were the deep state, I would want guarantees that Trump won't do whatever he wants once he becomes president. And I would want someone that he knows that the deep state would be happy to assassinate him to replace him with by one means or another. And it would become the deep state insurance. Deep state knows if Trump picks Scott or Rubio, that Trump is not going to rock any boat when he's in the second term. He's not going to change anything meaningfully. He ain't going to drain no swamp if he's in there. That's what they know. They know if he picks J.D. Vance or he picks Ben Carson, then all bets are off. And then once he's in there, he may follow through on the things he's talked about in defunding the deep state and getting some payback against these corrupt actors so they are discouraged and deterred from doing so in the future. As Steve Bannon talked about being necessary all weekend while he's about to go to federal prison for standing up for President Trump. So that's why I say it matters as much as it really. The reason why I'm highlighting these things at this moment, some people are like, oh, Barnes is just conspiring to support Robert Kennedy. That's not it at all. It's because in the next 2 weeks, Trump is going to pick his vice president. And that's going to tell us everything about his future.
Let me take a deep breath, Robert. I'm having shortness of breath, and I don't know if it's because of you or just life in general. What do we move on to?
Well, you are
now?
Up there in Kamida, so
I know
the air can be impressive.
I tell you, I sit here looking out at the window. It's beautiful, mountains, water. Everything's beautiful except the politics. And you can choose to travel for landscape, but you have to choose to live for politics. That's the crazy thing. What do we got next, Robert? What do you want to move on to?
Now on the white pill side,
yeah,
a little more detail of the Supreme Court's decision on the jury trial case. We also have the opioids bankruptcy case, which was more on the white pill side. More of a mixed deal was their homelessness decision. And then later on, we have some big news on the vaccine mandate front. And we got that gender case out of Montana, where the liberals from Missoula, as they like to call them in Montana, proved to be true liberals from Missoula, even on the bench.
Well, Robert, hold on. While we have what might be close to the biggest audience we're going to have for the evening, tell everyone about your victory against Tyson Food, because I know you're happy about it and you deserve as much amplification for that victory as you can. I don't understand. I hadn't been following the procedural posture, as we say. What happened and why is it good? Because it's sticking it to Tyson Food.
So, I mean, this was the first big case against vaccine mandates as soon as they were coming down the pipeline in late 2021. So the vaccine mandate started with companies announcing it in the summer and early fall, and then enforcing it in late fall. And it was prior to the Biden administration forcing it through. The Tyson Foods was very close with the Biden administration rolling this out. They were supposed to be the example case for all other companies across the world to follow. To say, see, this is how you make sure your employees take this vaccine, so-called vaccine. They told their employees they could object, but only on limited grounds, only on medical grounds or religious grounds. Their employees did. Then they told their employees, well, we recognize you have sincere religious or medical objections to this, so we're going to give you a special status. It's called leave, but it's unpaid leave. There's another word for that.
It's fired, Robert. It's called fired.
It's taken away all your main benefits and your actual paycheck. So don't worry, you're still on just leave, You're just not going to get paid anymore.
Can I ask, like, are they? It's even worse than that because they can't. I don't believe. Would they be able to work somewhere else? Like, you would not be able to work somewhere.
They could work somewhere else, but there was a risk they would lose any opportunity of reinstatement if the Tyson ever reversed itself. So they were putting these people in limbo. Tyson was contesting in many cases their unemployment benefits, so they couldn't even get unemployment benefits. So they were getting hammered every which way. And many of these people were blue collar workers who had worked at Tyson for more than 25 years in some cases. You're talking about long-term employees. So these are working class folks in working class towns that have been deeply loyal to Tyson Foods. And Tyson Foods reciprocated that loyalty by denying them the essential benefits of employment solely because they had a religious objection or medical objection to a drug that they wanted to force them to take. So we initially filed suit in state court in Chancery County, and we didn't file suit to seek attorney's fees. We didn't file suit to even seek monetary damages. Initially filed suit to get legal clarity on whether this was legal or not, what Tyson Foods was doing under Tennessee state law initially, and to give Tyson the opportunity to get clarity. See if the courts are okay with this. If the courts are okay with it, then we'll deal with it accordingly. But if they're not, fix it now rather than screw these employees over. The Tyson Foods, in this case, acted like they were going to engage with that process. Because it seemed to me a very fair process. Their risk was very limited. This was clarity they needed anyway, sooner or later. And so they're like, yeah, why don't you do all your research on an expedited basis and file these extensive, detailed briefs where my whole firm dropped everything and did nothing but that case for 3 weeks. And then right on the eve of the hearing, and for Tyson Foods to respond to our legal paperwork, they suddenly removed the case to federal district court in Jackson, Tennessee, completely preventing any early opportunity to get direction or resolution and putting these employees in permanent limbo. About a year later, after this had been a complete debacle for Tyson Foods in the court of public opinion, complete debacle for the Biden administration, complete debacle for Tyson Foods in terms of employment, because the people that they let go were some of their best employees, they suddenly reversed themselves. They also did it hoping to limit the amount of damages they would have to pay in all the different lawsuits that had been filed. But they argued that the Tennessee state law claim that we were primarily seeking relief under, because Tennessee passed a great law. All the controversy concerning this Tyson Foods case led Tennessee legislature to pass a law banning employers from imposing vaccine mandates on people, and said that if a person objects for any reason, they're like, we're not even going to let you employers speculate as to the reason. They have any reason, you got to let them work there. You can't take any adverse action of any kind. And so, but according to Tyson, that law was passed. Passed in response to Tyson Foods, and they're like, "Hey, you passed that law 11 days after it put people on leave, so now the law doesn't apply to us." Ha ha ha! There was a problem with that. They left them on permanent unpaid leave. It meant they were discriminating against them every single day they were on that unpaid leave. They were engaging in a new adverse action every single day. They're those little super smart guys over in Fayetteville in the general counsel's office thought they'd come up with a super genius way to get out of legal liability. Well, guess what? You created legal liability for yourself, geniuses. And so we went to the federal district court. They moved for summary judgment on the grounds this law could never apply to them. We moved for partial summary judgment on the issue of liability. We said the law clearly does apply to them, and we should just let a jury decide damages. And this past week, the federal district court said we were right and Tyson was wrong. Said Tyson violated these people's rights, and the only question is a question of damages. How much is it going to take to compensate them for? How much of reasonable attorney's fees does Tyson Foods now owe? an attorney's fees bill that is very big because of the nonsense Tyson Foods engaged in this case. And remember, this was the case where they were playing such shenanigans that I had to file suit in 3 different state courts to get over to this court, to get to that court. I mean, just to deal with the nonsense of Tyson Foods. They got a EEOC referral somehow sent to Fayetteville, Arkansas, when it's supposed to be handled in Tennessee. They had letters sent out that weren't sent out to the right people that I was never even notified on, all as a scheme to get away with that part of the deal. So great. It's the biggest decision interpreting this Tennessee state law that's been issued, or any state law like it in the country. It is the now a model law for every other state to follow. And the only reason any of it's possible, the only reason the law exists, the only reason why this decision exists is the only reason there was as much consistent, effective speaking out against these mandates and their harms that ultimately saved a lot of people's lives who did not take this vaccine and suffer injury, disability, or death from it, because that has happened related to Tennessee employees who were forced to take it. Employees have died. Employees are disabled. Employees are severely injured because of what Tyson Foods forced on them. But that would have been a much worse issue if there hadn't been a blowback against the vaccine mandates, and there wouldn't have been as big a blowback against the vaccine mandates, especially in Tennessee, but to a degree across the country, unless a lot of ordinary working class, blue collar folks from West Tennessee were willing to stand up for their rights and everybody else's rights and say no, even though it meant they wouldn't have the means to put food on the table or pay for their kids to go to school. So I was pleased to represent all of these people. So the credit isn't to us. The credit is to those ordinary, everyday, working class people across this country who stood up for their rights despite all odds being stacked against them. They're the ones that deserve the credit.
Robert, what happens next? Is it going to be settlement time for
They're going to write a
Tyson?
check. They're going to write a big fat check, and they can apologize, or we'll let a jury decide how fat that check should be. And they might want to check out the Chattanooga case, where a jury just awarded in the first major vaccine mandate case to go to trial anywhere in the country over $600,000 in damages. So these people will tell you stories that you'll break your heart in 5 seconds. So if they're smart, they should say, you know what, we were wrong. We're going to apologize to every single one of our employees. We're going to say we were wrong. We shouldn't have done it. We're going to agree to a consent decree that we never do it again. Put that in an injunctive relief in the federal district court. We'll write a check for every harm you suffered. And I'll take a huge haircut on the attorney's fees if they're willing to do that. If they're not willing to do that, we'll let a jury write a check and then a judge write a check after that, or order them to write a check, and they'll be writing lots of checks. And maybe it'll be enough to cover Don Tyson's cocaine abuse problem. Maybe it'll be enough to cover their other chief financial officer is busy getting so drunk he's invading other people's homes and trying to jump into a single woman's bed that wasn't his girlfriend or wife. It wasn't even his home. Maybe they can deal with some of their other problems over there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. But it's thanks to all these ordinary, everyday people that a lot of rights and a lot of lives of ordinary people were saved.
But if I'm being cynical, they'll drag you through an appeals to this process.
They can drag me through all of it. They're gonna the longer they drag this through, the bigger the check gets. That's it. They're losing. They're gonna lose. Told them they're gonna lose. They've already lost, and they can just lose some more. How big do they want the L to be? That's the only question they have now.
Robert, I can't end it better than that. I'm going to go back to Rumble for a second. D-Town123, 2016, Ben Carson, quoted by Bloomberg. Amy, arm Ukraine, expand NATO, remove Russia from the UN Security Council, carve new Palestine out of Egypt. I'm not convinced he's a safe for Trump. I didn't see any quotes there, so I don't know if these are actual direct quotes. Robert, do you know anything about that being Ben Carson's policy?
I don't.
Viva. Robert, any thoughts on the new book of Kennedy? Nope. We already got that one. Okay. Robert, what do we got next? Next on the ballot.
So we got, this was related before we turn back to a couple of the Supreme Court cases and then that crazy gender roles case. United Airlines, I'm part of a range of cases that has been fighting United Airlines for doing similar things. I've had to fight these cases all over the country. Anytime I sue in one jurisdiction, they try to drag it to Chicago. Have to fight that for forever. So it's multiple levels of this. It goes from one court to another court, back to up this court. Good news is federal courts are recognizing there's a right to a class action against United Airlines for systemically violating the civil liberties and civil rights of people in their way in which they ignored religious accommodation requests for their pilots, stewards, stewardesses, mechanics, and others. And so it looks like the big case against United Airlines is going to move forward. So that is very promising on that front. And then on the PrEP Act, there's now a second, really a third. There's a case in D.C. brought by Ray Flores that challenges aspects of what happened. There's another case by Aaron Siri in Louisiana that's challenging the PrEP Act. There's now a new case brought by Moms for America, Jeff Childers and others down there in Florida, the lawyers, that's challenging the PrEP Act, pointing out that the PrEP Act violates your Article 3 rights, and because it usurps judicial power and gives it to the administrative branch, and prohibits people from having common law right of access to the courts, which in turn violates your 7th Amendment right to jury trial by jury. It violates the Administrative Procedures Act because of the way in which it excessively delegates authority and doesn't require reasoned decision-making in the way emergency order decrees are issued in the first instance that are the predicate to grant all this immunity. It violates the 5th Amendment for lack of procedural due process in these so-called vaccine injury courts that are a crock, and violates 5th Amendment and substantive due process rights to have a common law right to sue. So that's promising. We got to get through the PrEP Act if we're going to get any relief or remedy for all the injured people. The only other case that can provide that remedy is Brooke Jackson's case, where we're waiting on the district court to rule. And we did file a supplemental brief this week to show the court other examples of favorable cases that support our argument that have either been issued since our oral argument or have come to our attention since then. So promising on that. And the one reason why the PrEP Act might really have got a boost is the Supreme Court's jury trial decision this week.
And just so everybody appreciates, the PrEP Act is what immunized the pharma companies from their vaccine. In Canada, we didn't have a PrEP Act legislative immunity. We had contractual hold harmless clauses, which makes it possible to sue the pharma companies in Canada, South Africa, and other countries, which is where they're being sued, which is where a lot of stuff is being disclosed. In the UK, it may have been South Africa or Australia. The AstraZeneca, I think that was the latest one to disclose the fact that, yeah, their stuff was dangerous and killing people. In Canada, Moderna and Pfizer are being sued by Kayla Pollock and Dan Hartman, the father of Sean Hartman, respectively, because we don't have PrEP Act immunity. We had contractual hold harmless clauses, which means you get to sue them, but they get to call the government and to hold them harmless. And if the government says you lied to us and you concealed information, we no longer have to hold you harmless, that's when the shit starts hitting the fan for the pharma companies. In the States, you got the PrEP Act. So Godspeed and good riddance, hopefully, to bad rubbish. Robert, what else?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the administrative state context, but it applies much more broadly. In fact, I'll probably be bringing suit on these grounds for the previously illegally imprisoned farmers in Pennsylvania as an example. It's a strong argument against the PrEP Act, for striking the PrEP Act's immunity. They might open the door for all injured people related to the COVID-19 vaccines or other injuries that took place in hospitals and medical treatment, remdesivir and other things that PrEP Act coverage has been excusing for a while. Not in all courts, but in too many. And that is the right to trial by jury. The language in it is fantastic. The language in it talks about how ancient this right, how critical this right is, how broad this right is, how the reason why the 7th Amendment exists is because it was the number one reason why the first Constitution almost failed to pass, is it did not include a right to trial by jury in a civil case. Right to trial by jury is included in Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution for a criminal case. But for a civil case, it wasn't there. People are outraged, said, well, we're not going through this nonsense anymore. We've already seen how the Brits created their own fake courts so they could get around the right to trial by jury with their own politically motivated appointees and eviscerated our rights. We don't want to go through that ever again. And they said, oh, hey, USEC, you have no right to issue civil fines in a fraud case. You've got to sue them and take it to a trial by jury. And they pointed out what a joke these administrative trials have been. They point out the SEC won over 90% of the time in these kind of trials. Historically, how these agencies got away with this, given how robust and well recognized the right to trial by jury is? By saying there's a public rights exception. And nice that this time the Supreme Court drastically limited that to what it should be. They said if the claim is the kind of claim that existed at common law at the time of our founding, or in say 1865 as applied to the states, that then you have a right to trial by jury. If the kind of relief or remedy you're seeking is the kind that a jury was typically had to decide back at the time of our founding, then too, you've got to go to a jury before you can get that kind of relief and remedy. And I've been trying to make this argument to deaf ears for a quarter century, that when they're seeking monetary relief, that should be a jury trial always and forever. I believe this about judicial sanctions too. We'll see how it ends up working out in that context. But this is the best, broadest Seventh Amendment ruling in American constitutional history. And it's followed up by them limiting the public rights exception. So they said, here's the times when you don't have to have trial by jury. If it's the government only enforcing something that only applies to the government, there's no private right of any kind whatsoever. And this goes beyond the standing context, where they've often called a lot of things public injury rather than private injury. That isn't their claim here. It has to be literally a governmental injury, and government specific and government only, and it cannot be anything akin to or analogous to either the kind of claim or the kind of relief typically done by a jury. So to that earlier live chat question, here's one area, unfortunately, they did exclude from the right to trial by jury. But if it concerns government action, government land, government benefit, government immigration, Indian tribes, foreign nations, or the government's collecting tax revenue, those are the times you're not entitled to a trial by jury. Why is the government so scared of a trial by jury in a tax case? The civil tax case makes you wonder. But otherwise, a fantastic ruling that is the grounds to challenge, like the regulatory agencies issuing fines to those illegally imprisoned farmers in Pennsylvania. They never got a jury trial. And here the SEC said civil fines sound like monetary relief, sound like the kind of thing that typically requires a trial by jury. So there's a bunch of administrative agencies love their fines. All of them now are in jeopardy if there's anything analogous to it to the time of our founding. And in my view, if it's monetary relief, there is. That they need to be revoking a license. Okay, maybe not. But fining somebody, probably so. Taking away money, taking away property. If you're not simply just trying to restore the status quo ante, like an injunctive relief, which is a classic equitable rather than common law claim, then jury trial entitled. So it eviscerated not only the administrative state, probably more consequentially than the Chevron decision, but opened up grounds to make a really robust right to a trial by jury in a bunch of other cases. So it was my white pill case of the week from the Supreme Court.
How much do we have left? We're going to save it for vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
We got the homelessness case. We got opioids and bankruptcy, both those from the Supreme Court. We've got then the other case, the case you covered, the Montana gender roles case, when even the judge, even in Montana, doesn't know what gender means. Needs a special title to figure it out in the law. And then last but not least, when it's really ill-advised to try to extort your lawyer. When you think that if you've ever hired a lawyer in any capacity at any time for any reason through even some ancillary entity, that you now have a permanent injunction and prior restraint on their speech forever. And you can do whatever illegal bad acts you want to, and they can never question or judge you. And if they do that, you could sue them, apparently. So explaining to some folks out there when it's a bad idea to try to extort your lawyer.
Well, Robert, so first of all, I clicked on Salty Cracker because he had a great meme of the Grim Reaper coming after Joe Biden, and then I accidentally shared our locals link in his chat, not ours. And now I don't want to look like a big ass poacher. I apologize, Salty. I meant to share our locals because we're ending on you right now.
We'll reciprocate later. We've sent people to the re-stream of the one and the only, the great, the inimitable, the irreplaceable Salty Cracker.
What an asshole I must look like. I'm randomly appear in his chat saying, "Come to locals." Like, okay, sorry. Anyhow, everyone knows where to go to watch what they want to watch. So Salty, that was my bad. I'm going to end us now, Robert. On
also briefly, been in jail and Julian
Yes.
Assange's plea deal.
But by the way,
Julian Assange's plea deal.
is Bannon going to jail it's not tomorrow, it's a week from tomorrow, right?
No, it's Monday.
Tomorrow's Monday.
Yeah, in fact, he's going to do his last War Room show from right outside the federal prison before he walks in.
Shut the front door, Robert.
But the one guy who finally got out of prison is Julian Assange. But there was interesting aspects to that plea deal.
Okay, we're gonna get there right now. I'll just read these before I leave. Barnes, why aren't we in a constitutional crisis right now? Biden is not running the executive, so who the hell is? Damn good question.
The
Thanks,
same deep state that usually does that, other than Trump, Carter, and Kennedy, had carte blanche. Well, Nixon in his own way pushed back, but more often than not, really runs the administrative state and always has, sadly.
And then we've got here, thanks to the Barnes, you make sense. Any chance to mingle Tyson case to help the GOB over COVID-19? The GOB, I don't know what that is. Required by the FBI. Like employees of Tyson, GOB has family and his life. Well, I don't know who GOB is in particular, but 26, we got that there. Okay, Robert, this is what we're going to do. We're going to stop it here. Boom, bada bing, bada bing. We're going to end it on Rumble. Robert, what do you have coming up this week before I forget to ask?
Oh, it'll just be got legal work here. Brother's coming out later on this week. There's going to be some fun for July 4th. There's going to be some fun Copa America games here in Vegas that we're going to go to. So that's on the family. I'll have a little mini vacation. I don't know if it's a full vacation because I got some big summary judgment motion paperwork for guys being screwed over by a bank. Got another set of clients they're trying to steal their farm, also a bank. Banks are usually bad faith actors. Got some criminal cases and civil cases in Pennsylvania and elsewhere still ongoing. So but we'll have live Bourbons with Barnes Monday, Tuesday, and likely Wednesday nights of this week.
Fantastic. And for me, I don't know if I have anything scheduled for this week, but stay tuned. I'll be live like random hours and a random schedule. No heads up and no nothing. We're ending on Rumble now. Come on over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com and we will have the after party there doing it.
Oh,
and
there are to the question in the live chat. There are bet recommendations for the July 4th election in the United Kingdom. You can find them at sportspicks.locals.com and see what recommendations we have for who we think might overachieve the expectations. Might look a lot like the French elections today.
All right, people, that is it for the non-locals end of this stream. Ending on Rumble. Come on over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. This will all be on Viva Clips in its entirety. Viva and Barnes Law for the people on podcast. And see you all tomorrow if you're not coming over. But come now. Ending. Bada bing, bada boom. All right, we're out. Robert, going over here to locals now. Bada bing, bada boom. Tipped. Going to go down here. Robert, 3 things. 1, Patrick Kane is staying with Detroit Red Wings. I don't know that. I'm joking. I know that I'm not that. Viva has a Florida ban. You really need a boat or at least a jet ski to enjoy Florida to its fullest. 3, Instagram. Okay, we have an example here of the police department being totalitarian in response to the holiday celebrating the overthrow of a totalitarian government. I just can't believe we were up here in Canada when the Panthers won the Stanley Cup against the Oilers. Wild. I don't really care about that, though. Sammy says, why does it feel like a setup to make Trump radioactive again like they did with Jan 6? There's too much falling in the favor of the American people. And let's not forget the over 1 million undocumented Chinese across the southern border. It feels like something big and bad is going to happen. Can't blame anybody for feeling that. We got Tanyo says, does the jury trial thing get rid of the civil asset forfeiture procedures, Robert?
It will depend. In many cases, yes. In not all cases, but in many, there'll be good arguments for it.
Esalair says, do we think there will be a second debate? I don't think Biden's going to be around, but that's mine. I don't think there should be one. I hope both decline to continue. Tyson Foods. Tyson checks Barnes clients 6.5 million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, mega, quadrillion. All right, and we got Biden deserves zero sympathy for his current physical condition. Remember, he stood at a podium in September 2021 saying his patience was wearing thin. I think he was demented back then too, and that employers should fire people who wouldn't take experimental poison. Think about how many deaths and destroyed lives he has caused. He's an evil man. I agree with that. Barnes, why the hell would... Oh, that was from Until Is Empty. Entry required says, Barnes, why the hell would we take a spring chicken like J.D. Vance that may have potential in the Senate out of where he might be able to do some good?
Well, because as vice president, he'll be the successor to Trump and populism in America on a national scale.
Yeah, no,
and that's a lot more power than being in the Senate.
Entry required says, Barnes, tell me of the major accomplishment of Ben Carson during his leadership of HUD.
He just didn't spend the entire time trying to betray Trump. I know it's kind of weird when the greatest thing you do is you don't try to screw over the guy who put you there. But since 9/10 of Trump's appointees and staff members spent their time trying to screw over Trump and the MAGA movement, the mere fact that Ben Carson refused every one of their entreaties and actually followed through on what Trump wanted him to do with HUD is extraordinary. It's sad that it makes it that extraordinary, but it's the truth of it.
And enemy gate is down. To me, says Viva, the biblical metaphor. Pontius Pilate is that he knew Jesus was innocent, but the crowd demanded Jesus be crucified anyway. He has poured water over his hands and said, I am innocent of this man's blood. The crowd, according to the Bible, said his blood be on us and our children. Clean Willis. Could a Trump administration lean hard on the tech companies with respect to censoring his opponents to the point where he wouldn't even do it? He would fight with principles, but could he?
What is problematic is all this started while Trump was president. He didn't know it, but it was happening by Fauci. It was happening by CISA on the elections. It was happening in the Justice Department with Bill Barr. It was happening at the FBI. They were actually using the power of the Trump executive branch to screw over Trump and his supporters. And that's why it's like we need some repairs and remedies on the personnel side. Not talking about building a new, beautiful FBI building. Wrong answer. So that's what I'm concerned about, is that he puts a bunch of people that will betray him right around him in such a way that what people are voting for, they don't get.
Robert, if I get arrested in Canada, will you come to the rescue? I got one criminal law. I got 3 on my speed dial, so don't worry about that. If in Barrett's writing, she had a part that insinuated that the Hunter laptop was Russian disinformation. She didn't even know it was real. Are these justices purposely staying out of the information regarding current events? That's from Boomin Vrooman.
She's the kind of person who believes elite information. She comes from about 15 generations of Southern aristocracy. There was nothing about her that suggested she was going to listen to the commoners and listen to the kind of things that the commoners listen to. That was, yes, the fact that she was citing favorably many of the censorship efforts and not exposing them for the abject fraud they were, told you what an abject fraud she is.
Todd Plambeck, that's a new name that I haven't seen before, I don't think. Why does SCOTUS hold the most important decisions for the end of the term? Many of the Jan 6 political prisoners could be free today if they would have released this obvious decision earlier in the term instead of waiting for the final day. Well, it's not the final day. They got next week. But Robert, they got Monday.
The more controversial contested cases always usually come at the very end, especially when Roberts is the Chief Justice. That's the issue.
Blue CW Soldier, $5. One of the basic concepts of leadership and supervision is that a leader is responsible for the decisions of her followers. The J6 law was regarding corruption in an ongoing investigation. Congress was not investigating anything. They were carrying out the responsibilities of their offices regarding approving or not approving determined election. The law should be thrown out due to that. Am I right? Says Boomin Vrooman. I think you sound pretty right. Robert, in the Chevron decision, didn't Robert state that all previous regulations based on Chevron are not automatically reversed? How can we start dismantling the administrative states?
Well, the prior decisions, judicial adjudications, those are pretty limited.
And we got 788 Dave says, remember O'Keefe reporting on Act Blue fraud, where citizens were supposedly donating 3 times a day. Oh, yeah, I remember that. If that money has to be returned, how will that work? I think it was below a certain threshold. It doesn't have to be returned, if I'm not mistaken. Dennis T. I might be wrong, by the way. Dennis T. on Bannon's War Room. WJM McGinley stated that the DNC rules have all political donations that have been raised by Biden goes to the DNC, state parties and their apparatus, and become available for any person or purpose. His Biden replacement theory seems to have legs. Robert?
That not in most cases. So it depends on the donation, but nothing raised directly for Biden and Harris can go to the DNC. It just can't.
Michael,
it has to be refunded. The DNC, it can spend it to a certain degree, but that's federal law, right? Otherwise, every single candidate would just have this big pool of funds that could be spent. You could completely ignore all campaign finance limit laws.
Mhm.
So people that are interpreting the law that way are assuming that there are no campaign finance limit laws left.
Robert, please clip your rants by subject so we can have a collection of them. This one on Barrett is epic. Everybody out there, please clip them. I clip them and share them. Let's do it. Best and worst case outcome on the immunity ruling. We've talked about it, but best case, absent impeachment and conviction, presidential immunity.
Yep.
Likely case, the official
Your
presidential
acts are immune, your personal acts are not, and there has to be a disciplined review of the factual record to discern which is which. That's the most likely one decision. They should do the impeachment only decision.
Mm-hmm.
They're more likely to do that decision. But we'll also say, even for your presidential acts, you can be indicted if you're impeached and convicted. But I think the least likely is that they affirm the DC Court of Appeals.
Best and worst. Okay, Robert, you have an uncanny instinct for RFK Jr.'s political positions. Will RFK Jr. be celebrating the death of the Chevron deference? I would imagine yes.
Yes.
Democrats,
so not as much as other people. He's not as big on. He thinks the administrative state has been corrupted, not that it can't serve a democratic purpose. That's a fundamental disagreement I have with him.
We got Ithaca Cato. Ithaca 37 Cato says Democrat spelled backwards is tarcomed, which sounds like some weird fetish porn. I ain't asking questions. Anderson Hertzberg says, hey, Viva, I want to bug you again about the Google API leak I talked about on Wednesday. Tried to email you the full details via email on YouTube, but it didn't go through. Could I get a hold of you on Twitter? I am Heartless BSEO on Twitter. I'll DM you, Heartless. And I think that does it for locals.
There was one or two just came in on locals.
Yeah, well, let me do Spam Ranger says regarding COVID and vaccines, I'm encountering people displaying anomalous. Okay, I got that. Let me go all the way to the bottom. Why does it feel like a setup? No, hold on, I got to refresh because I'm an idiot. Hold on, I'm still on the commie internet. It doesn't now. Look how long it's taken to refresh. Now I got a pig. That's not even Bill Brown's Templeton. Okay, we got Robert. I know Justice Roberts is your favorite justice. Is ACB your new favorite? That's from JH62.
Indeed.
With the rulings against Tyson, will there be ways to take action against other companies? For instance, I am a full-time WFH. I don't know if that employee for IBM. Work from home employee for IBM and send written objections about the requirement of the vaccine, but only on the last day take it or get fired. I folded as I am a breadwinner. Now I am worried about the side effects. I would say don't worry about the side effects depending on how long it's been. But Robert, work from home, being forced to get jabbed. I mean, it's so fucking stupid. It's beyond words.
Yeah. I mean, we still have all those cases all across the country. So those cases march forward. But we're getting some big wins. The Tennessee one was very big. We got more to come. The other thing with the Tennessee one is we fought it when they used every hook and crook to prohibit us from doing so with clients who never could have paid us. And so the goal was to drag it out, you make it so prohibitively expensive to discourage lawyers from taking on these cases. So when other lawyers watching the case see the success, they're like, oh, okay, if we stay, we show we can stick in there, then we can win this. We can win more than our fair share of these. And that gets more lawyers involved, which allow more people to seek relief and remedy that will further discourage and deter bad business actors from doing this in the future.
All right. Well, I think that does it there, Robert. What do we have left for
Julian Assange.
Oh,
man,
shit.
he's a free man.
Well, so he's totally free, or has he not yet been
Yeah,
extra? Has he flown off to
Yeah,
Australia?
he's in Australia.
Son of a have we seen any video of him? Like, I haven't seen any
Yeah.
video. Does he
See
look
video of him getting on the plane from the UK, going to the airport, leaving the airport, on the plane back to Australia, and now in Australia.
and when I say video though,
He had to pay like
have we heard him
$500,000
talk?
just for the plane. And I guess somebody fronted the cost, and one Bitcoin person gave him the whole reimbursement. You know, because he's got this is a sign of how you combine the court of public opinion with the court of law to defend someone the entire world is coming after. The Julian Assange case is a perfect example of how you can use those two and parallel them to achieve an outcome that most outside observers did not think possible. They managed to first keep him from being inside a prison for a long period of time by getting him to the Ecuadorian embassy. And then while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, lobbying for him in the court of public opinion, rebrandishing his case from a case of state secrets to a case of whistleblowing, a case of the problem of government corruption being covered up by state secrets, that state secrets are the problem. To quote the movie Sneakers, great film, no more secrets. That's what Julian Assange is a big fan of. And so, and then continuing to use every available remedy in the extradition process to drag this out to the point that they were on the eve of worrying the Biden administration they were about to lose, that would establish a precedent around the world that would limit the government's power to go and grab people around the world. Like they're doing to Roger Ver currently in Spain, like they did to John McAfee in Spain. So that was their legal risk. Their political risk was right on going into an election, Assange being a hot topic around the world and in U.S. political elections. And so it put Biden in. And then the third was the great skill of Julian Assange. For a long time, Assange had put out there that who knows what WikiLeaks has. And he never disclosed it. He never revealed it fully. He's like, all he said was, there's a lot of WikiLeaks files that I've never told anyone about, that we have not yet publicly disclosed. And in that capacity, for a lot of this will be a shock to a degree for Assange, because people forget the time he went in, he was kind of not that well known around the world. Mm-hmm. He wasn't an internationally renowned icon. And it was the brilliance of the court of public opinion, the brilliance of the court of law, and him telling the U.S. government, who knows what's sitting in my files. So the plea deal was, we're going to just count it as time served. We get our conviction for legal purposes to say, yes, we can criminally prosecute whistleblowers and journalists. And that's, so we get that. We get a little bit of your head on the stake, because we got to make your life miserable for a decade, including 5 years in Belmarsh. And most importantly, as part of the plea deal, you agree to delete all WikiLeaks files, including files that have nothing to do with the files that are the subject of the criminal case, which they said all the DNC email files, you got to eliminate those. And it's not like they were really obsessed with those, because Kim.com already has published them to the world. I'll tell you, if you're going to go after somebody, don't go after a brilliant internet guy and court of public opinion guy, right? The two dumbest prosecutions they've done is they try to go after Assange, and Assange fought back intelligently and brilliantly. Try to go after Kim.com. He has fought back intelligently and brilliantly. And my guess is the U.S. government was also terrified and paranoid at what the heck else he's got in those WikiLeaks files. So they're like, okay, you promise to delete everything, right? I mean, you delete, please delete everything. But we don't need to know what it is. We don't need you to tell anybody what it is. You just delete. And that's the three basis of Julian Assange's plea deal.
Well, but how do they know what he publishes in the future if it was what was supposed to be deleted? I presume they verified.
My guess is he's going to stay out of that business for a while. and that's the implicit quid pro quo.
Yeah,
But he had to file, and other people at WikiLeaks had to file under penalty of perjury that all files had been destroyed and deleted. And if it turns out they hadn't, that would be a separate crime prosecutable as perjury. So that will be that. My guess is Assange will, make the rounds. He has heart issues and other issues. He will make the rounds ultimately in the court of public opinion once he recovers from all this. But I suspect you will not see him get back into this particular business anytime soon.
No, and it might be my projection, but nobody's going to convince me that he doesn't look like a physically broken, psychologically broken, spiritually broken, spent 10 plus years locked up in a prison. And for what? Because a bunch of emails and he'll never do it again. And everybody, the government wins at the end of the day. If I can be
it's just not a full victory. A full victory would be Julian Assange in Supermax until he died. That would have been the victory they wanted. They wanted a victory that would terrify anybody else from ever wanting to be Julian Assange.
Oh, this should terrify people. It
will intimidate them, but terrify them? I suspect not. There's going to be a lot of people that look out there and say, I would love to be Julian Assange. Watch Julian Assange remake himself the way Fidel Castro remade Che Guevara after Che was killed in Bolivia by Felix Rodriguez, who, for whatever reason, Tucker just had on. It's like, I wouldn't have that guy anywhere near me. Just tell you this, FYI. That guy, Iran-Contra. I mean, that guy touches every scandal known to man. The Kennedy assassination. I mean, you name it. I was like, that's interesting. I don't know what's going on there. But I think what he'll do, in fact, an advisor to LBJ wrote this right after it was announced Guevara was killed, because LBJ's people didn't want Guevara killed. They wanted him imprisoned. And the analyst said, this is going to be a disaster. Castro is going to recast this as Che Guevara, the universal martyr and martyr. The Cubans have all these great photos of Che Guevara, will now claim no copyright on those photos. So you can put them on every T-shirt, every image, every hat around the world. And he will make Che Guevara a martyr for the world, for the cause of communism. And indeed, that was exactly Fidel's speech a few days later, where he said, when we have doubts, let them be like Che. When we have, and everything came back to let them be like Che, let them be like Che. And it's from that moment that all the Che T-shirts and Che's hat would develop over the decade. Assange, watch him try to use the same thing, that to create an image that recasts this story as himself the hero, and to get other people to want to engage. He won't go out and redo this activity again, but he'll recast himself as a hero to encourage the next young mind to say, yeah, I'm going to go up against a scary power. Yeah, I may serve 5 years in a brutal state prison. Yeah, I may have to hide out in an embassy for 10 years, but I want to be like Julian Assange. So the deep state didn't get the head on that they really needed. They got a partial victory, not a full victory.
And if anyone's going to want to do anything like this in the future, I presume they're going to want to do it from countries with no extradition laws. So if I'm looking, I don't know who wants to live in Iran, or UAE might be nice.
Yeah, Russia's not bad. Ed Snowden's hanging out there pretty good. They're culturally conservative. Their number one song right now is a cultural folk song.
I'm trying to think of where Armenia. I've been told. Who did I just meet that was Armenian? Was telling me Armenia is actually quite beautiful. Djibouti. Okay, I'm not sure about that. Lebanon. I'm not sure I would want to live there. Cuba, definitely not. Syria, no. UAE, maybe. And Vietnam. I guess I'd have to learn an entirely new language. So if you're going to be a Julian Assange, do it from a country with no extradition provisions.
Go to Russia. I mean, that's the reality. That's isn't that crazy? Russia, the heart of the Soviet Union, is now in many respects the freest place on the planet for many people.
As they say,
kinds of issues.
Old is new. Stingway says $5. Is it possible that the government tries to Epstein Assange anyway? In Australia, I presume that might be more. No,
that's terrible. Finboy Slick is doing a Gavin Newsom, Stacey Abrams one, I think, and he stuck our faces on it.
Well,
that's a crime.
Hold on, Robert.
I'm
Stacey Abrams. Who's?
No, I think he has me as Stacey Abrams. I think you're Gavin Newsom.
Oh my God!
Well, Gavin Newsom.
Oh God! You as a black woman, I never thought I would. The things I never thought I'd see. Okay, that's hilarious. Have we done
We
it?
got
Do we
a
have
couple of other quick cases.
Yeah, go for it.
There's not much Bannon can do at this point. Supreme Court said no. So he's going to be, he told people, don't write me letters. I'm not going to read them. Go out there and be active, make a difference in the real world.
I love that. It's so good. Don't write me. Save your time and
Yeah.
put your action to good stuff. Okay, Bannon, I will not write you a letter, but I will be vocal. Okay.
Yeah, I probably will write my letter. So it's like nobody else is. So hey, why not? Hey, Steve, I got some ideas. And I'll send it because I can send it as legal mail. Throwing some attorney legal advice in there, so they can't quite to do the same sneak peek they do on all the rest. And I'll probably include as a cover letter, like what I often do with prison mail. It says, if you're reading this and you're not the client, you're not supposed to be reading this, just to help them out. But the other two big cases, other than reminding people not to try to extort their lawyer, opioids. Remember we discussed this way back at the beginning of the year. This was the Sackler family of Purdue Pharmaceuticals.
Absolutely. They entered into a settlement that basically absolved them of all criminal exposure after murdering hundreds of thousands of people. Okay, I absolutely remember that.
And they were using the corporate bankruptcy to do it, even though they as individuals had never filed bankruptcy. But they would only agree to a corporate bankruptcy reorganization if everybody agreed, the bankruptcy court agreed to let them individually off the hook as well, civilly and criminally. And the Supreme Court said, nah, that's not exactly how bankruptcy court works. And they also mentioned how bankruptcy court has to work or not work in the Seventh Amendment context, talking about bankruptcy courts can't be going around eviscerating people's rights to trial by jury. So again, a 5-4 decision with Jackson joining the conservatives, interestingly enough. And what it was a catch-all loophole that basically they're using the catch-all phraseology that said, hey, as a bankruptcy court, whatever else you need to do, you can do consistent with these other things. And just like Barrett interpreted that to mean, oh, that's anything you want to do now. That's how the bankruptcy court interpreted it. And the court's like, no. That means things like what's before it and after it. They did the exact same statutory interpretation in this one that they did in the January 6th case. And they said, that means the Sacklers do not get permanent immunity when they haven't even filed for bankruptcy themselves. And the people they're getting immunity from haven't signed off on it either. They're like, you're just eviscerating people's jury trial rights without any legal process. And just because there's some broad language that the bankruptcy court can do whatever else is necessary, it means something like the other powers it has, not that it can just now eviscerate everything else at once. Once again, Jackson was on the right side. Barrett was on the wrong side. And then the other two, homelessness, a decision. This is another one we've discussed. We discussed it, the multiple district courts.
This was the one where they prohibited homeless people from camping, no camping or pitching, sleeping in parks. And the homeless said this is cruel and unusual punishment. Supreme Court said, no, it's not.
Yeah, they basically rewrote the Eighth Amendment and drastically limited it. They didn't completely reverse it, but I found it disappointing. In this case, I agree with aspects of what the liberals said. Now, Gorsuch wrote it, so Gorsuch put a lot of caveats in there. He talked about every criminal case has to require fair notice, equal treatment, neutral judge, a jury of your vicinage that is impartial and not prejudged you, that the importance of the First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment all provide additional protections along with Article 3 against criminal prosecutions and punishments. Now, he acted like that was routinely enforced in federal court. I don't know what fantasy land he's been acting in, because that's almost never enforced in federal court. But putting that aside, they basically said that the prior exception they had, which was they said cruel and unusual punishment in a prior case to treat involuntary conduct status as a crime. What happened is they said if you are addicted to drugs, it's a crime. Even if you didn't possess drugs or use drugs, you're just a drug addict. You're now a criminal if you come to California. Supreme Court said you can't criminalize that under the Eighth Amendment. And to me, that is part of the Eighth Amendment. There's been a judicial tendency to limit the Eighth Amendment to the method of punishment only and not whether certain crimes can be crimes in the first place. And instead, they stick that into the Fifth Amendment, which is more limited. And to me, it applies to both. that cruel and unusual punishment can include punishing anyone for involuntary conduct. The way Gorsuch limited the effect of the decision is he said the Constitution still requires there be subjective mens rea. There must be intent before it can be a crime. And he said, look, necessity is a defense, duress is a defense, diminished capacity is a defense. And he suggested, without holding, because he was a bit of a wuss on this part of it, or maybe he just couldn't get buy-in and votes. What he should have said, these are included in due process of law. These included under the Second Amendment right of self-defense in certain instances. Then you would have constitutional protection against putting people in prison for things they can't control. But they didn't. And in fact, instead, they said the Eighth Amendment only prohibits criminalizing purely status. If you're doing anything beyond that, they said even criminalizing involuntary conduct doesn't violate the Eighth Amendment. I disagree with them on that, but you could see that's where they're heading. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett just can't get past all the homeless people, so that's why she was going to join the decision. And a lot of conservatives were cheering it because, like, yeah, now we can deal with our homelessness problem. Yeah, by depriving people of their constitutional rights. Good job. Woohoo. I'm not as big a fan of the decision as they are.
What's the who's extorting their lawyer, Robert?
We also got the Montana gender case that you found.
Oh, the Montana gender case. I mean, it's just a stupid case. Put out a vlog on it about a law that sought to define sex for the purposes of gender issues and boys and girls sports, et cetera, and it got tossed on a purely procedural issue, as far as I can understand, Robert. That the what is it? I forget the provision now. Like the title has to have one subject, one line, or whatever. The title needs to specify what's in the law, and if it doesn't, then it gets struck down. My only question was, after it gets struck down because the title didn't clearly specify what the object of the law was, because you didn't know if it was sex in terms of the act or the identification. Once it gets struck down, do they just go past it with a specific title, or am I wrong in thinking maybe the judge is right for holding the legislator's feet to the fire and to just do your job properly, or is it ridiculous?
I mean, I think the judge is a liberal from Missoula. That's what I think.
Oh, I just hit the wall. Because it's kind of ridiculous. Like, the title has to specify the object of the law. And I don't know if
there's laws that require that. But what they're doing isn't really, it's pretty obvious. You know, she was like, no, people don't know necessarily what references to the word sex means. I mean, come on. In the legislative context, you think they're really trying to get into intercourse? No, I don't think so. But it's infamous in Montana. The liberal judges are in Missoula. So that's why it's like a tagline in campaigns. They go way back. Oh, so-and-so's a liberal from Missoula. Because it has a little bit of alliterative quality in the middle, phraseology, or sounds similar. And so that's my view on it. But yeah, on the attempt to extort your lawyer. So many years ago, as a request and favor to Nick Rekieta, I represented a small little limited liability company being subpoenaed. And Nick said, hey, I think they're being targeted for First Amendment discriminatory reasons. So I was like, all right, I'll help them out. And because it was in Wisconsin, I'm licensed in Wisconsin, so it was easy.
No good deed goes unpunished, Robert.
Charged them a ridiculously low $5,000 fee. Got them out of all of it. And that was it. And all I represented was a limited liability company. I didn't represent the individual. I didn't represent whatever the limited liability company did, or any entity it was involved with, or any business or any like that. So flash forward to someone at Kiwi Farms, a website, is out pushing that they want to crowdfund to get the body camera footage from the raid on Nick Rekieta's home that is primarily has all of his kids, including little kids. I think, 8, 7 years old, 9 years old, kids like that on it. And I publicly spoke out against that and said they should not be nobody should be seeking to hurt these kids because they hate Nick Rekieta. If you want to hate Nick Rekieta, fine. Don't put these kids on blast. Don't disclose these kids. Don't dox these kids. Don't do it to these kids. Whatever you think about Rekieta, whatever you think about the legal issues concerning him or he himself. Well, suddenly out of the blue, I get an email from another lawyer that many years ago I had referred that prior small little business client to. It was like, yeah, any other future issues, talk to this guy. The only reason why they know him, he's very affordable, very accessible. And he said that, there's concerns that your statements about Kiwi Farms might be based on inside information from a client. I'm like, what? What the heck? It's like, that's ridiculous. What client? Oh, it's that little limited liability company. It's actually owned by this Joshua Moon guy who actually owns and operates Kiwi Farms, according to him. And they're concerned that your criticism of Kiwi Farms could be interpreted as inside information that you gained as a lawyer from them. I'm like, I don't think so, because nobody even knew I ever represented Kiwi Farms, because I didn't know I represented Kiwi Farms. I represented a little limited liability company. I have no inside information about Joshua Moon at all. Never did. I have no inside information about Kiwi Farms. I have no inside information about any of it. I defended a subpoena in this case that only had to deal with legal matters, such that I needed no information of any kind from him or his company. But I said, I'll make it clear that I have zero inside information. So, but then Joshua Moon apparently was unsatisfied with that and decided to follow up with public threats that I'm filing ethics complaints and looking at suing you because I'm going to claim that you disclosed inside information, him knowing that's a lie. So why did he do it? The email from the beginning, I suspected, and now by his public statements to me, it's proven, he's trying to do criminal extortion. The nitwit thinks, oh, and this is like a lot of the people on that Kiwi Farms and that trolling world. They try to extort and blackmail people into not having opinions they don't want them to have, into not disclosing their bad conduct when they're going after whoever the latest social media lynch mob target it has been chosen to be. And they partially do this by brigading their chats, brigading their comment sections, brigading their replies on Twitter, social media, harassing anybody who says anything, so that what happens is they feel intimidated. They're like, oh, I'm going to lose monetization. I'm going to lose support in the court of public opinion. And because their supporters go quiet, because they're like, I don't want to be harassed by these people. I mean, this is how Nick Fuentes' peoples operate. It's purely an intimidation campaign. It's no different than the mob coming by saying it'd be too bad if your little business burnt down. Why don't you buy some fire insurance? It's no different than any other kind of mob mentality. Now, they're all a bunch of losers who live in their mama's basements and can't get a real job, can't get a date, can't get a real life. So I get it. They look in the mirror, they see somebody miserable, so they point their finger and attack everybody. Ariana Grande had a great quote about critics in general, that most critics hate themselves, so they have to find somewhere to put that hatred, so they go out and attack everyone else for what are really their own problems. Another example of confession through projection. But this dimwit thought if he kept escalating his threats against me, that somehow it would get me to stay silent about the sleazy behavior of Kiwi Farms and him. And by the way, he had said, the lawyer said in this email, he would never, ever, he doesn't want anything disclosed about the kids. Well, guess where Nick Rekieta's kids' medical health history was personally doxed to the entire world?
Kiwi
Farms and Joshua Moon. So he was lying about that too. Once again, I'm not saying he's lying because I have inside information, because I have no inside information. I'm basing that on witnessing and watching it in live time. And folks, hiring a lawyer is not a permanent prior restraint on their speech. Just in case you didn't know that either. Indeed, a lawyer you hire can later be a lawyer against you, depending on the circumstances and facts of the case. So the people that think, can you imagine? You think for $5,000, you bought a lawyer's permanent silence about your bad public deeds for
Robert,
forever?
What did you
How
say?
stupid do you got to be? You got to be as dumb as the people that usually spend time on Kiwi Farms.
Robert, as you say, dumb and criminals are two separate categories, but put them together, and you got people who think they bought off a lawyer for $5,000 for whatever mandate that he had, however many years ago. Robert, I'm going to bring this up, and then I think I've been summoned from the front door here. Rumor has it Nick's oldest boy is refusing to turn state and testify against him because Child Protective Services won't let the boy adopt the new name Tyler Durden. 4D chess is the best. I don't know what's going on. Do you have any updates on that? Speaking of Kiwi Farms and that story.
No, I don't. Other than I'm now going to be more consistently publicly critical of Kiwi Farms and Joshua Moon. That if the just when you try to intimidate certain people, just recognize that sometimes it can backfire against you. So that the way that some of us respond to blackmail and extortion threats is to make the people who make those threats pay a very high price for ever trying it in the first place. So I'm not going to be silent on the Nick Rekieta case and the government abuses. Not going to be silent on the bad behavior of Joshua Moon and Kiwi Farms. I get they're a bunch of, sleazy autists that have no lives. They're like just going around attacking other people for spite to make up for their life. Go out and get a date, one of you people, for the love of God. I mean, that's the other reason why we got to fix that part of the process. What happens when you have these loser autists that can't get dates? They become Joshua Moon. They become people like this. And they make everybody's life miserable.
I got to go see who Joshua Moon is after this. Robert, one last one. It's Finboy Slick. He says, here's $5 to make up for it. They can't all be awesome. I have to keep you guys on your toes. Oh, it was awesome. Just all for the wrong reasons. Robert, this has been another banger of an episode. I'm just going to make sure that I didn't miss any tipped questions here. No, we're good. We're good. In fact, before any more come in, Robert, I should be back in the city by tomorrow, hopefully. So the internet held up and everything was very good. Although the lighting makes me look pale and little red. Robert, thank you for being here. And thank you for everything. It's been amazing. Locals, stay tuned. Everything is going to be great next week. So there'll be live stuff and everything throughout the week. Robert, you and I will say our proper goodbyes and plan for the future. Everyone out there, how do I do this? I'm ending the stream now. Go forth and prosper and be strong, and don't try to blackmail your lawyers, especially if it's Robert Barnes. Go. Enjoy the weekend, people. Peace out. Booyah.